Chapter 416. Ouyang Shua took the Scarlet Knight's sword from Wang Feng. Upon closer inspection, the Crimson Knight's sword was decorated with 7 colored pearls and 9 splintered jade. It emitted a threatening cold light and flashed with golden light. The blade was like frost and snow, and 2 characters were clearly engraved on the body of the sword. Crimson Knight. It was truly a treasured sword. Name: Scarlet Knight's sword. Divine weapon. Hardness: 95. Sharpness: 85. Tenacity: 88. Characteristics: Edge breaker. When a weapon's hardness is lower than the Scarlet Heaven Sword, there is a certain chance that the weapon will be directly cut in half by the Scarlet Heaven Sword. Unique item. Cannot be dropped, cannot be traded. Characteristics: Emperor's Way. Increases Lord Prestige by 30. Historical Talent Attraction Rate by 20. Evaluation: The Red Knight Sword is a sword of the Emperor's Way, made of iron, inscribed with the Red Knight Great Seal script, 3 feet long. Great Ancestor Liu Bang's sword, a bronze sword forged by a swordsmith during the uprising. The body of the sword was similar to that of the Qin dynasty, with elegant patterns. Unlike Lin Jing's 7-star Dragon Well and Song Jia's Pure June sword, the Red Knight sword did not have a sure kill skill. Instead, it had a second characteristic: Emperor's Way. The Emperor's Path property was obviously more useful to lords. The sound of the system's notification sounded out in Ouyang Shua's ears. System notification: Congratulations to player, not saying that you have no clothes. The Scarlet Knight sword is compatible with the cultivation technique characteristic Emperor's Way, derived from the inner canon of a Yellow Emperor, and the third characteristic, Emperor's Might, has automatically been derived. When Ouyang Shua's inner canon of the Yellow Emperor reached the 6th level, the characteristic of Emperor's Way was born. Path of the Emperor, a Tao created by the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors. It enhances the heavenly perception and gives rise to the might of an emperor. As a result, the Scarlet Knight's sword possessed an unprecedented 3 characteristics. Emperor's Might increases morale by 30, Lord's dignity by 20, and talent attraction by 10. 2. Domineering. A divine weapon had 3 characteristics. Although Ouyang Shua didn't know how to use a sword, just the fact that he had a sword with him was enough to sublimate his personal characteristics. In addition, the soul of the Red Dragon Seal and the Golden Kylan Seal was also prepared by Ouyang Shua for the Red Knight sword. If the Dragon Soul was infused into the Scarlet Knight's sword, who knew what kind of mutation would occur? Taking the Demonic Spear as an example, its weapon soul was slowly born. After being promoted to a divine weapon, the weapon soul had gradually awakened, but it was still very weak. The Dragon Soul was different. If the Dragon Soul was used to replace the Artifact Soul, the divine weapon would be upgraded to another level. This also meant that it was not impossible for the Scarlet Knight's sword to be promoted to a sacred weapon. The only problem was that one had to be a divine craftsman to infuse the Dragon Soul into the Scarlet Knight's sword. Ouyang Shua thought of one person who was most suitable, and that person was Oyezi. I wonder where Master Oyezi is right now. Compared to the journey here, the journey back was much smoother. After 4 days and nights of traveling, the army returned to the giant deer battlefield. It was already the 14th day of the battle. The area outside Thornplain City had changed beyond recognition. The 3 defensive chains that Bai Qi had set up were all destroyed by the anti-Qin faction. Outside Jiuan City, corpses were strewn everywhere, and blood flowed like a river. The entire land was dyed red with blood. The trenches were filled with corpses. Plumes of black smoke drifted on the battlefield. It was the thick smoke of burning corpses. Such a scene was truly horrifying. It was like an endless hell. Even Ouyang Shua, who had long been accustomed to the bitterness of the battlefield, couldn't help but be moved. Ouyang Shua was unable to imagine exactly what sort of great battle had occurred in the colossal deer battlefield in a mere 10 days of time. He checked the contribution list and was shocked. His name was naturally still at the top of the list. There was no doubt about the lethality of the Imperial Guard Division. What shocked Ouyang Shua was the contribution points of other people. The 100th place on the list had a terrifying 23,000 contribution points. Are these people crazy? Ouyang Shua made a rough calculation. If he calculated it in reverse, according to the contribution points, at least 400,000 soldiers had died on the battlefield. 400,000 deaths. What kind of concept was that? This meant that 40,000 soldiers were dying every day. This was too crazy. For the sake of contribution points, the feudal lords were going all out. Wooey, how do we return to Thorn Plain City? That's right. How do we return? The area outside Thorn Plain City was already the territory of the anti-Qin faction. Densely packed tents were connected one after another outside Thorn Plain City. It was so vast that one couldn't see the end. At this time, Ouyang Shua didn't dare to show his face. They were currently on a small hill outside the city. They could only see the battlefield from afar. It's difficult. Ouyang Shua shook his head. He also didn't expect that the battle would be so bitter. He also didn't expect that the anti-Qin faction would be so fierce under the leadership of Xiang Yu. The 3 defensive chains that Bai Qi had meticulously set up were broken through in just 10 days. Overlord, as expected of the Overlord. The best thing to do now was to stay outside the city until the battle ended. If they took the risk and were caught by the anti-Qin faction, it would be a disastrous blow to the Qin faction. Not to mention the 40,000 to 50,000 soldiers from Shanghai City, Lingxi City, and Luofeng City. Just the fact that Bai Qi was teleported away was enough to make the Qin faction go crazy. Why don't we sneak attack Jilu City? Feng Qiuhuang suggested. It's useless. Ouyang Shua shook his head and said, Jilu City is now an empty city. Even if we take it down, it won't help the battle. Instead, it will expose our existence. Then, why don't we go find Zhang Liang, the sage strategist? Feng Qiuhuang's eyes lit up. She had a greedy look on her face. Ouyang Shua was speechless. We don't even know where Zhang Liang is. Where are we going to find him? The vast battlefield was not a place for an army to run freely. If they were not careful, they might fail miserably. Then what should we do? We can't just sit around and do nothing. Feng Qiuhuang was a little discouraged. It's good to wait, Bai Hua continued. I'm already satisfied to be able to subdue a king-level general. That's true. Feng Qiuhuang muttered. It's going to be a huge battle. It's a pity that I can't participate in it. Ouyang Shua shook his head and said nothing. He also wanted to return to Jiyuan City, and it was a must. Zhang Han was still waiting for him to subdue him in Jiyuan City. If he didn't return, Ouyang Shua couldn't guarantee that Zhang Han would directly follow Bai Qi back to Shanghai City. But as a lord, Ouyang Shua couldn't take the risk. He couldn't disregard the interests of the alliance for his own benefit. Just wait. Ouyang Shua smiled. We'll get a detailed report by tonight at the latest. When Bai Hua heard this, he looked at Ouyang Shua and silently nodded his head. The two girls knew that Shanghai City had a secret communication method, so they weren't surprised. Ever since the system patch, even the Alliance channel had been banned in the battle map. Otherwise, Ouyang Shua wouldn't have used the hummingbird to obtain the battle report. Jiyuan City, Mayor's Mansion. Commander-in-Chief, Marquis has sent a letter. The Tiger General Lin walked in with a translated letter in his hand. He had no right to read Marquis's secret letter. Bai Qi stood up and solemnly took the letter. He opened it and read it. After a while, Bai Qi revealed a rare smile and looked at Lin. Marquis has succeeded. He's currently stationed at a secret place outside the city. That's great. Lin, he was also delighted. He asked, Commander-in-Chief, do you want me to go out of the city to receive Marquis? No. Bai Qi shook his head. It's too risky. Marquis has also said that we won't enter the city for now. He'll leave this battle to us. Lin, he nodded solemnly. Up until now, the Qin's camp hadn't gained much of an advantage. In the battle, the anti-Qin camp had lost more than 250,000 men, while the Qin camp had also lost 160,000 men. Even the Praetorian division had lost 600 to 700 men. Xiang Yu's explosive power was too terrifying. The three defensive chains were all taken down by Xiang Yu and the Jiangdong warriors as the vanguard. Under Xiang Yu's encouragement, the Jiangdong warriors fought 1 against 10. The ordinary Inhumans were like paper in front of them. Even the Praetorian division and the Mountain Barbarian Heavy Brigade paled in comparison to the Jiangdong warriors. Perhaps only Marquis's Featherwood Guards could compete with the Jiangdong warriors. Bai Qi glanced at Lin Yi with an indescribable expression. Before the battle, the Tiger General was full of confidence, as if he was the strongest army in the world. He didn't think that he would suffer such a huge setback in front of the Jiangdong warriors. Well, if he didn't experience a setback, he wouldn't know that there was always someone better out there. It was time to teach the Praetorian Division a lesson. Lin Yi's confidence had grown too fast after his achievements in the Battle of Laizhou. This was also a common problem for young generals. In comparison, the reborn Luo Shixin was much steadier. What about Lin Yi? As the flag of the territory's local generals, he had only been in the army for about a year and a half, and he was already the commander of the army. Too fast a promotion inevitably brought about some side effects. Marquis was also aware of this. The night before the battle began, he talked to him alone about this matter. Bai Qi was not only good at fighting, but he was also good at training generals. During his time in Qin, Wang Bei, Wang Ling, Meng Ao, Ying Bao, and other generals were all trained by Bai Qi. Bai Qi was quite optimistic about Lin Yi. Although he was young and full of vigor, his aptitude was still the best. He was a promising talent. Thinking of this, Bai Qi couldn't help but admire Marquis's foresight. Among the local generals, Lin Yi and Zhao Sihu were the only ones that Marquis really valued and could achieve great things. Even Wang Feng, the general of the Featherwood Guards, was still somewhat lacking in commanding troops. Marquis also noticed this, so he transferred Wang Feng from the Praetorian Division to become the commander of the Featherwood Guards. The organization of the Featherwood Guards was simple, so the requirements for commanding troops were lower. Otherwise, it would be difficult for Wang Feng to command the Praetorian Division. As for the other local generals, only Zhao Yan, Hu Yibiao, and a few others had some potential. Li Mingliang was also a good seedling, but unfortunately he died in battle early. The others like Zhang Dainiu and Zhou Feng were already unbearable. From this, it could be seen how difficult it was to train a general. Even with such excellent conditions in Shanghai City, they could only train 1 or 2 generals. As for how to fight this big battle, Bai Qi already had a draft in his mind, and he had already started to arrange it. To be continued. Chapter 417. P.S. I apologize for the one update I missed the day before. General, what should we do next? Bai Qi didn't say anything. He sat in front of his desk and wrote a letter, reporting the details of the battle to Marquis. At the same time, Bai Qi had also written down the next step of the war. Men, here. An Iron Eagle swordsman walked into the study. Send this letter to Marquis. Yes, sir. The Iron Eagle swordsman took the letter and left. After replying, Bai Qi turned to Lin Yi. Defend the city tomorrow and don't go out. No matter what Xiangyu chooses, remember, don't go out of the city. Understood. Lin Yi nodded after hearing that. All of the generals of Shanghai City had great faith in General Bai Qi. Speaking of generals, Xiangyu had to mention Xiangyu, the hegemon. After breaking through 3 defense lines, Xiangyu led his troops to the east gate of Jiyuan City. Xiangyu wasn't just brave in battle. He had the brains for strategy as well. He knew that the Qin army didn't suffer any serious losses in the past 10 days. The main force had retreated to Jiyuan City. Xiangyu didn't have the confidence to take down a city guarded by millions of soldiers. No matter how arrogant he was, he wouldn't be this arrogant. Fortunately, Xiangyu had his own way of doing things. He took the lead and set up a formation at the east gate, declaring that he would fight 1 against 4. No matter which 4 generals the Qin sent, he would take them on alone. He would never go back on his word. This provocation caused a huge commotion in the Qin army. The fierce general Eli couldn't hold it in anymore and wanted to fight Xiangyu. Fortunately, Bai Qi stopped him in time. Xiangyu's bravery was indeed invincible, but to say that he would fight 1 against 4 was too arrogant. Perhaps he didn't know that there were several fierce generals in the Inhuman army. Eli, Zhang Liao, Qin Xiong, and Wang Bei. All of them were fierce generals. Other than that, the other lords had many fierce generals under them as well. The generals weren't happy with Xiangyu's provocation. If it wasn't for Bai Qi, a battle would have started immediately. Bai Qi wouldn't fall for it. No matter who won, they wouldn't have an advantage in a battle with Xiangyu. If they lost, they would suffer heavy casualties. If they won, they would be besieged. There was nothing to brag about. Not to mention, it was hard to defeat Xiangyu, and even harder to kill him. If he couldn't kill it, everything would be futile. Not to mention, deep down, Bai Qi looked down on General Dou. As the god of war, for Bai Qi, the battlefield was a battle between armies. Battle of generals? Childish. Back when Xiangyu was attacking the chain of defense, Bai Qi had already arranged for Wang Li's army to sneak along the Taihang treacherous road to Hanoi County. He then turned north from Hanoi County and quietly arrived at Anyang City. As mentioned before, Jianyuan City's geographical location was very unique, located at the bottom of the pocket. Anyang City happened to be located at the entrance of the pocket. Every time the anti-Qin army broke through a chain of defense, they took a step into the pocket. By the time the 3 defensive chains were all broken, they had already entered the valley. Just as Ouyang Shua had guessed, Giant Deer was currently an empty city. Once Wang Li's army arrived at Anyang City, they would be able to surround the anti-Qin army with the help of Jiyuan City. Bai Qi's arrangements were not simple. The 3 defensive chains he had set up were both fortifications and bait. The reason why Bai Qi was confident that the anti-Qin army would fall for it was because he had a good understanding of Xiangyu's character and the issue of provisions at the heart of the campaign. In terms of bravery, Bai Qi naturally couldn't compare to Xiangyu. But in terms of strategy, Xiangyu was no match for Bai Qi. It wasn't that no one in the anti-Qin camp could see through Bai Qi's arrangements, but Xiangyu didn't listen. This person was Han Xin, Xiangyu's provisions officer, who had yet to achieve his ambitions. What kind of person was Han Xin? After observing the surrounding terrain, he was already suspicious. When Xiangyu's army pressed forward and the Qin army retreated, he became even more suspicious. Han Xin met Xiangyu and explained his thoughts, but all he got in return was mockery and disdain. In Xiangyu's eyes, it was all because of his bravery that he was able to break through the defensive chains. How could it be a trick of the enemy? It was obvious what kind of disdain Han Xin would receive after he finished speaking. Han Xin walked out of the tent and let out a long sigh. "Mister, why are you sighing?" Just then, a young man walked over slowly. "You are..." This was Xiangyu's tent, and ordinary people were not allowed to enter. Although Han Xin was not in an important position, he knew all the generals in Xiangyu's camp and knew that there was no such person. The young man smiled and bowed solemnly. "Di Chun, the representative of the mutants, greets you, Mr. The representative of the mutants?" Han Xion's eyes narrowed. "Yes, I am." Han Xion nodded and turned to leave without saying anything else. Han Xion had not come into contact with the mutants, so he didn't want to talk about them in detail. But Di Chun wouldn't give up. After all, Di Chun had been waiting outside Xiangyu's tent for a week and finally caught Han Xion. Anyone in the anti-Qin camp who had done any homework before the war knew that Xiangyu's camp had a divine general, Han Xion, who was comparable to Bai Qi. Unfortunately, Han Xion's position in the army was so low that no one recognized him. Moreover, he was in Xiangyu's army, so ordinary lords couldn't find him. Only Di Chun, as the representative of the mutants, could search Xiangyu's camp. Even so, he didn't find anything. In the end, Di Chun decided to wait outside Xiangyu's tent every day. The heavens rewarded those who waited. Finally, Di Chun caught Han Xion. "I prepared some wine in the tent. Please do me the honor, mister." "I don't drink." Han Xion shook his head and refused again. "Mister." Di Chun bowed again and said, "Please do me the honor, mister." With such sincerity, Han Xion could no longer refuse, so he nodded and agreed. Di Chun was overjoyed. Sometimes it was useful to be thick-skinned. It was not strange to be polite. The wisdom of the ancients was not to be underestimated. "This way, please, mister." Di Chun was very polite and led the way. Han Xion didn't say anything and just followed behind Di Chun. Some people in the camp recognized Han Xion, and when they saw Di Chun treating him so respectfully, they couldn't help but look at him in surprise. But Han Xion didn't care at all. When the two of them came to the tent, good wine and dishes were indeed prepared. Han Xian was sulking, so he picked up the wine and drank it. Di Chun didn't say anything and just drank with Han Xian. As they drank, they gradually became familiar with each other. Seeing that the time was right, Di Chun asked casually, "Mister, you're a talented man. Why do you want to serve in the army?" Alas, Han Xian sighed, his eyes full of loneliness. "Unfortunately, I didn't meet a good leader. If Mister doesn't mind, you can work for me." "You?" Han Xian glanced at him, expressing his doubt. Di Chun didn't mind. He introduced the situation of the main map and said, "If Mister is willing, I'm willing to worship you as the general." Hearing this, Han Xian's eyes flashed with a trace of desire. "Although I only have tens of thousands of troops under my command, it will only take a few years. But in time, hundreds of thousands or even millions of troops will be under my command. All the troops will be under the command of the general." Di Chun promised again, and even quietly changed his title to general. Han Xian glanced at Di Chun again, still unable to make up his mind. Di Chun smiled bitterly. It really wasn't that easy to subdue a god-level general. "What do you think about tomorrow's battle, General?" Di Chun knew that this matter couldn't be rushed, so he asked. "Our army will definitely lose." Han Xian was full of confidence in this. "Oh," Di Chun was shocked. He didn't expect to get such an answer from a casual question. In his opinion, the anti-Qin army was winning again and again. So how could they lose? But who was this person in front of him? He was Han Xian. Di Chun had to believe it. "General, please teach me." Di Chun bowed again. Hearing this, Han Xian nodded with satisfaction and told him his judgment. Hearing this, Di Chun broke out in a cold sweat. Thinking of Bai Chi's arrangements in the Battle of Lian Province, Di Chun had to believe it. "No, I must persuade General Xiang," Di Chun said, getting up to go to Xiang Yu's tent. But Han Xian didn't move and said calmly, "It's useless." "Huh? General Xiang is stubborn. Why would he listen to you?" After drinking a little, Han Xian's words became more unrestrained. Hearing this, Di Chun thought of Xiang Yu's personality and smiled bitterly. It was true. Although the Yin-Huang alliance had helped Xiang Yu gain command of the army, Di Chun didn't have the confidence to change Xiang Yu's mind. "Are we just going to sit here and watch our side lose?" Di Chun was worried. Half of it was true. The other half was for Han Xian to see. Hearing this, Han Xian glanced at Di Chun for the third time. Suddenly, a light flashed in his eyes, and he said slowly, "It's not that there is no solution. Teacher, please teach me." Di Chun couldn't remember how many times he had bowed to Han Xian. Fine, I'll put on a show." Di Chun was determined to move Han Xian with sincerity. Hearing this, Han Xian said non-committally, "If we can have an army to occupy Anyang City, then the enemy's plan to lure us and will be broken." Hearing this, Di Chun was hesitant. Of course, he understood what Han Xian meant. But to disobey the military order and attack Anyang City, risking being punished by Xiang Yu, was a big risk. If anything went wrong, Di Chun, would end up with nothing in the Battle of Giant Deer. Inadvertently, Di Chun saw Han Xian's expression and was shocked. Not good. Han Xian was testing him. If he couldn't even make this decision, how could he be worthy of Han Xian's loyalty? "Forget it. I'll throw caution to the wind. As long as I can subdue Han Xian, any price is worth it." Di Chun made up his mind. "All right, I'll listen to the general's arrangements." Hearing this, Han Xian nodded. Because he was going to attack without authorization, he naturally couldn't mobilize an army. But to defend Anyang, he couldn't have too few troops. After weighing the pros and cons, he finally decided to send 30,000 troops to attack Anyang City. Apart from Di Chun's troops, he also roped in 5 or 6 allies. As for the Yin-Huang alliance, Di Chun had no hope at all. They wouldn't take the risk with Di Chun. Di Chun would take all the benefits, but bear all the risks? Even Battle Wolf would not agree to it. Fortunately, Di Chun's influence among the lords was not small. In the anti-Qin camp, he had a group of hardcore followers. Just like this, Di Chun made the arrangements that night. Tomorrow morning, he would quietly leave the camp with his troops and go to Anyang City. That night, Ouyang Shuo received a secret letter from Bai Qi. Knowing Bai Qi's plan, Ouyang Shuo immediately decided to lead his troops to Anyang City and wait for Wang Li's army to meet up. At this time, Anyang was also an empty city. Apart from the citizens, there was no garrison. After entering the city, the Featherwood Guard smoothly took over the city's defense. Ouyang Shuo didn't know that a sudden collision was waiting for him. At this time, Wang Li's army was at least a day's journey away from Anyang. To be continued. Chapter 4:18. Nightfall, Anyang City. After entering Anyang, Ouyang Shuo and the others settled down in the city lord's residence. The officials of Anyang City had long fled. The residence was empty, with all sorts of objects and furniture lying all over the place. Seeing this, Wang Feng arranged for a platoon to be in charge of tidying up the residence. Fortunately, Ouyang Shuo wasn't a picky person. After tidying up a bit, he got to work. As for the rooms, the two ladies were in charge of tidying them up. They had a full set of bedding in their storage pouches, so there was no need to worry. In this regard, Gaia was rather humane. It didn't mean that not using storage pouches during the war meant that nothing could be done. If that was the case, the players would definitely cause a ruckus. Faced with such an elite army, the nobles, merchants, and commoners of Anyang didn't dare to do anything. They were like a flock of lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Furthermore, Ouyang Shuo had to personally meet with the representatives of the nobles and merchants. Considering Bai Qi's strategy, Ouyang Shuo had to take control of Anyang City as soon as possible. First and foremost, he had to appease the commoners. The world had been against the Qin dynasty for a long time, and Anyang was within the borders of Zhao. Zhang Han had looted all the food in Anyang City, but less than 10% of the commoners were left behind. Those who were left were the nobles and merchants. Zhang Han was lenient toward them. He knew that in order to support the entire war, he couldn't completely exterminate the nobles and merchants. Otherwise, going too far would be as bad as not going far enough. Ouyang Shuo's attitude was unyielding. As the representative of the Qin dynasty, he reiterated his stance that anyone who dared to collude with the revolutionary army and spread the news would have their entire clan exterminated. After being frightened by Ouyang Shuo, all the aristocratic families and merchants were in fear and trepidation. Because this was a military map, Ouyang Shuo didn't bother trying to buy people's hearts. He directly announced that from tonight onward, Anyang City would be under full military control. The guard of the nobles had to be gathered and put under the command of the Featherwood Guard. Ouyang Shuo couldn't tolerate an armed force that wasn't under his control staying in Anyang City. The various merchant associations had to prepare supplies and gather them together for the army to eat. The cities around Jilu had been plundered by Zhang Han before being plundered by the revolutionary army, so there wasn't much food left in the area. The rations that Ouyang Shuo had brought with him were running low, so he naturally needed to replenish them. Not only did Ouyang Shuo lack food, but the anti-Qin army also lacked food. In order to ensure the food supply, Xiang Yu had already arranged for his second father, Fan Zeng, to personally go to Peng City to collect food. The grain transport team was different from the Featherwood Guard. They could transport the grain from Pengcheng to Jilu in 4 or 5 days. Conservatively, it would take at least 4 days for the first batch of food to arrive at Giant Deer. Ouyang Shuo busied himself until late at night before returning to his room to rest. Baiwa and Feng Xiaohuang were not good at fighting, but they were good at managing civil affairs and logistics. They helped Ouyang Shuo a lot. Otherwise, things wouldn't have gone so smoothly. The next morning, Anyang City became lively again. The common people in the city were mobilized by the Featherwood Guard to repair the city walls and store supplies for defending the city. The Featherwood Guard was responsible for guarding all the major city gates. Entry was permitted, but exit was not permitted. This matter was of great importance, and Ouyang Shuo had no choice but to be cautious. He only hoped that nothing would go wrong before Wang Li's army reached Anyang. The originally inconspicuous Anyang City had become the focal point of the battle. Last night, Ouyang Shuo had already dispatched a small team to reinforce Wang Li's army. Accompanying them were hummingbirds. Ouyang Shua's arrangement was to facilitate communication between the two armies. It was purely a precaution. Who would have thought that it would actually come in handy? At the same time, in the camp of the anti-Qin army, the 30,000 troops had quietly assembled and walked out of the camp under Lian Po's lead. The mutant army's camp was separated from the anti-Qin army. Nominally, it was managed by Di Chun. Using this convenience, Di Chun was able to bring the army out of the camp. Even so, when Xiang Yu received the news, he would not be able to escape punishment. Di Chun was very confident in attacking Anyang City. It was an empty city to begin with. The difficult part was to defend Anyang City and defend against the Qin dynasty's army. Although Han Xin had seen through Bai Qi's arrangements, he could not answer a series of questions such as how many troops Bai Qi had arranged and when the Qin army would arrive at Anyang City. Therefore, Di Chun invited Han Xin to accompany the army. Unexpectedly, Han Xin shook his head and refused. It was only 30,000 troops, and Lian Po was the commander. Han Xin had no interest in interfering. Moreover, he was now a supply soldier under Xiang Yu's army. How could he leave his post without permission? Once discovered, according to the military law, Han Xin would be punished. Seeing this, Di Chun shook his head regretfully. Di Chun's intention in inviting Han Xin to accompany the army was not simple. First, Han Xin had a higher chance of winning. After all, Han Xin knew the Qin army better than Lian Po. Second, Di Chun's scheming. He wanted Han Xin to break the military law, so that Han Xin could not stay with Xiang Yu's army and could only join Di Chun's camp. When it came to playing tricks, these aristocratic sons were really good at it. Unfortunately, Han Xin did not fall for it. Helplessly, Di Chun could only lead his troops to Anyang City. The camp of the anti-Qin army was only half a day's journey from Anyang City. At noon, the 30,000 troops arrived outside Anyang City. Di Chun rode on his warhorse, looking at Anyang City from afar. The success of the Battle of Giant Deer depended on this fight. At this moment, a vanguard came to report. Report. Speak. My lord, we found a garrison in Anyang City. It is not an empty city. What? Di Chun was shocked. Could it be that he was already a step too late? Lian Po, on the other hand, was calmer. He asked, how many troops are there in the city? Which unit is it? General, there are no flags on the city wall. We don't know which unit it is. I took a look from afar and saw commoners repairing the city wall. There are not many patrolling soldiers. Lian Po's eyes brightened. He turned to Di Chun and said, my lord, they must be the vanguard of the Qin army. They have just arrived at Anyang City. This is a heaven-sent opportunity. As long as we take Anyang City before the main Qin army arrives, everything is still going according to plan. At first, Lian Po was not convinced by Han Xin's judgment. The appearance of a Qin vanguard undoubtedly confirmed Han Xin's judgment. Lian Po began to pay more attention to Han Xin. Correct. Di Chun nodded firmly. No need to wait. Let's attack. We must take Anyang City. When it was time to be decisive, Di Chun was decisive. Yes, my lord. The 30,000 troops suddenly sped up and rushed toward Anyang City. The mighty army naturally could not escape the detection of the Featherwood Guard. Ouyang Shua's heart trembled when he received the news. How many enemies are there? No less than 30,000. They are mainly infantry, like a mutant army. Not good. The 3,000 Featherwood Guard in Baiwa and Feng Qiuwang's 1,000 elites were reduced to 3,500 after several battles. Even if the hastily recruited guards were added together, there were less than 5,000. How could they deal with 30,000 with just 5,000? Ouyang Shua could not imagine why the other party would suddenly set their sights on Anyang City. After all, Anyang City had not set up any defenses against the anti-Qin army a week ago. He did not see them enter the city. But on the second day after he entered the city, the mutant army attacked Anyang City. Such a coincidence could not help but make Ouyang Shua suspicious. Could it be that there was a mole? No way. There were only Ouyang Shua, Baiwa, and Feng Qiuwang on this trip. It was impossible. Or could it be that someone in Anyang City had tipped them off? Thinking of this, Ouyang Shua's eyes turned cold. Ouyang Shua shook off his thoughts. Now is not the time to think about this. Has Wang Lijun been contacted? I've contacted him. According to General Wang Lijun's report, the army was late by 2 days due to the rations in Hanoi. The vanguard will have to wait until tomorrow afternoon to reach Anyang City. Tomorrow afternoon? Anger flashed on Ouyang Shua's face. Wang Lijun dared not to march on time. Bai Qi's reply yesterday stated that Wang Lijun would reach Anyang City by this afternoon at the latest. He did not expect that Wang Lijun would be late by a day. 1 day on the battlefield was enough to change the direction of the war. Bai Qi's arrangements were naturally exquisite. He had also calculated that if Xiang Yu's army could not take down Jiyuan City, they might notice Anyang City behind them. Thus, Bai Qi told Wang Lijun to set off early. He did not expect Wang Lijun to be so daring. If Ouyang Shua had not rushed back from Su County and stationed himself in Anyang City. Once the anti-Qin army occupied Anyang City, Bai Qi's arrangements would have been for naught. The consequences would be unimaginable. Such a mistake should be executed. Killing intent flashed in Ouyang Shua's eyes. He tried his best to calm the anger in his heart and said, "Order Wang Lijun's vanguard to arrive at Anyang City by tomorrow morning. Otherwise, I will see you with my head." Yes. The guard's heart trembled, and he quickly retreated. He rarely saw the Marquis so angry. Although Ouyang Shua was the representative of the mutants, he could give orders to Wang Lijun. It might seem unreasonable, but it was normal. The day Wang Lijun arrived at Jiyuan City, Bai Qi summoned him. At that time, Ouyang Shua was also present, and he was sitting at the head. Obviously, Ouyang Shua was the second ruler in Qin's camp. As for Xianyang's second Qin, who cared about him? Thus, Ouyang Shua could give orders to Wang Lijun. After settling everything, Ouyang Shua summoned Bai Hua and Feng Xiaohuang. He briefly explained the military situation and said, "I will leave the logistics of the city to the two of you. Don't worry, leave it to us." The two women were also brave women, so they did not panic. Ouyang Shua nodded and hurried out of the city lord's mansion. At the entrance, the guard had already brought the green lightning. Ouyang Shua mounted the green lightning and said, "To the west city gate." The west city gate was where the enemy came from. To be continued. Chapter 419. At the west gate of Anyang City. In late autumn, the weeds had withered and turned yellow, and the autumn wind was biting cold. Ouyang Shua stood at the top of the city wall, watching the enemy in the distance. His scarlet cloak was fluttering in the wind. The cloak was specially made for him by Qing. Not only was it waterproof, it could also be used as a sleeping blanket. He looked up and saw a huge flag fluttering in the wind. The huge Lian character on the flag was extremely eye-catching. Lianpa? Ouyang Shua pondered with rapt attention. He never imagined that it would actually be another old friend. He and the Yin-Huang alliance really were arch-enemies. Wherever he went, he would bump into them. This time, he had no way out. Marquis. Wang Feng walked over and bowed respectfully. Ouyang Shua nodded and didn't turn around as he said, "Tell the men that they must hold out for a day. Reinforcements will arrive by tomorrow afternoon at the latest." "Yes, sir." Wang Feng nodded, but did not leave. Wang Feng gritted his teeth and said, "Marquis, you are injured. Please return to the city lord's residence to command. Leave the city to this general. I will not let you down." Ouyang Shua shook his head. "Marquis." Wang Feng was a little anxious. Ouyang Shua waved his hand. "There's no need to say anymore." "Yes, sir." Helpless, Wang Feng could only retreat. His earlier advice had already exhausted all of his courage. The danger of this battle was unknown, so Ouyang Shua had to personally oversee it and boost morale. This was a bloody battle. Fine, I'll use it to test the Featherwood Guard's results. Bai Qi had once said that Xiang Yu's warriors of River East could fight 10 men at once. Ouyang Shua believed that his Featherwood Guard was certainly not weaker than the River East's fierce warriors. "Guards, here, raise the Lord's flag at the top of the city. This city belongs to our Shanghai city." Ouyang Shua's tone was unquestionable. "Yes, sir." The guard's spirit was shaken, and he retreated. In the Featherwood Guard, there were specialized flag bearers in charge of managing the suzerain flag. When the suzerain's flag fluttered above the walls of Anyang, the Featherwood Guard no longer had a path of retreat. At this moment, the 3,000 Featherwood Guard became unprecedentedly impassioned. In order to protect this flag, they would fight to the death. A clap of thunder came from the distant sky. "Look, my lord, a flag has been raised on top of the city walls of Anyang." Upon hearing this, Di Chun looked up. His eyes narrowed, and then he was overjoyed. The mountain sea flag. Enemies wouldn't bump into each other. Let's see where you can run to this time. Everyone, attack Anyang City with all your might. The first person to reach the top of the city wall will be rewarded with 500 gold. Yes, sir. The army's morale was greatly boosted by the generous reward. The majestic army arrived at the moat of Anyang City in an instant. Anyang City was located on the north bank of the river. The other three sides were diverted from the river, forming a natural moat. If they wanted to take down Anyang City, they had to first break the moat. Long before the army arrived, the drawbridge of the city gate had already been pulled up. After Gaia released a system patch, players' storage bags could not be used in battle. Naturally, Daikin was unable to carry a large number of siege weapons. Moreover, in Di Chen's eyes, Anyang City was just an empty city. Thus, although the 30,000-strong army consisted mainly of infantry, they lacked sufficient siege weapons. However, this was not a problem for Lienpe. With an army of 30,000, they could take down Anyang City even with the simplest ladders. The Battle of Anyang had just begun, but it had already entered the most intense battle without any prelude. Under Lien Po's command, tens of thousands of saber and shield soldiers raised their shields and dragged sandbags into the moat. The Featherwood Guard on top of the city wall immediately returned the favor with bows and arrows. The Featherwood Guard was well equipped, skilled in archery and horsemanship, and skilled in both infantry and cavalry. Shanghai City's powerful bows brought death to the enemy with the sound of breaking air. In the distance, Lien Po did not waver. If there were mobile arrow towers, the army could counterattack. Unfortunately, they did not. Before the moat was filled, they could only passively take a beating. The sacrifices now were all temporary. In less than half an hour, the moat was dyed red with blood. Corpses floated on the surface of the river, flowing with the current toward the river. At the start of the battle, Di Chen consciously handed over command to Lien Po. He stood at the back of the army, deep in thought. Di Chen was wondering if he should report the battle to Xiang Yu. If he told Xiang Yu and let him lead the army to attack, Anyang City would fall in an instant. However, if he did that, his contribution would be greatly reduced. Wait a little longer. Di Chen was confident that with the 30,000 soldiers in front of him, they could definitely break through Anyang City. At that time, he would be the first hero of this battle. In front of Lien Po's steel-like will, the army was not afraid of sacrifice, and orderly filled the moat. Even the corpses were used as materials. 2 hours later, a section of the moat was completely filled. Kill! Lien Po waved his sword, and the army that had long been ready carried ladders and surged toward the top of the city wall like a tide. The fierce battle on top of the city wall had officially begun. Anyang was just an empty city, and defensive resources were scarce. Even the most basic stones and rolling logs were pitifully scarce. Only resources like fierce fire oil were not even worth thinking about. The city defense equipment was also so simple that it made people feel helpless. In less than half an hour, the army attacked the top of the city wall and engaged the Featherwood Guard in close combat. At this time, there was only a bloody battle. Ouyang Shuo shouted and swept the demonic spear forward. 3 soldiers who had just climbed up the mountain were all swept down the city wall. While still in midair, they spat out a large mouthful of blood. Ouyang Shuo's sweep not only swept them down, but it also injured their internal organs. Good. Seeing the Marquis show his might, the Featherwood Guard's blood boiled. The fierce battle on top of the city wall gradually entered a white-hot stage. Lien Po had the advantage in military strength, and simply did not think of giving the defenders on top of the city wall a chance to breathe. Under his command, The army launched wave after wave of attacks on the city wall. The Featherwood Guard stood on top of the city wall, but it was as if they were standing in the middle of the waves, facing wave after wave of attacks. The huge waves could drown them at any time. Facing the waves, they could only transform into stubborn stones, just like Ouyang Shua at this moment. He stood in a position and did not move. No matter how many enemies rushed to the top of the city wall, his demonic spear, whether sweeping, stabbing, or blocking, received them one by one. The enemy's blood flowed everywhere. The blood splattered everywhere, splashing onto Ouyang Shua's armor, helmet, and face. The scarlet cloak, against the backdrop of the blood, was even more bewitching. Like a raging flame, like the morning glow, the continuous battle was an enormous test of physical strength and willpower. Ouyang Shua was already numb. He stood where he was, his mind no longer thinking. The only thought was to sweep away the enemies before him and welcome the next wave. Below the city wall, the fallen corpses had already piled up to the height of 2 people. Not far away, the moat was densely packed with corpses floating on the river surface. Not a single drop of water could be seen. At first glance, it was more like a mountain of corpses than a river. As long as Ouyang Shua did not fall, the Featherwood Guard would not fall. The scarlet figure was tall and tenacious. This figure was where the Featherwood Guard's soul resided. Ouyang Shua was slightly careless, and his left arm was chopped off by a saber and shield soldier. He endured the sharp pain and stabbed with a demonic spear, directly piercing through the enemy. Marquis, the personal guards on both sides immediately surrounded him to share the pressure. "I'm fine." Ouyang Shua's expression did not change. He took out the gold sore medicine from his storage pouch, skillfully sprinkled it on the wound, and then wrapped it with gauze, completing a simple bandage. In his previous life, such a bandage was simply a common occurrence for him. After the bandage was finished, Ouyang Shua returned to the front line. When Ouyang Shua was injured, the entire front line stagnated. The enemy took the opportunity to surge to the top of the city wall in a steady stream. When Ouyang Shua appeared again, the Featherwood Guard finally let go of their worries, but the murderous intent in their eyes became increasingly intense. Damn it, they actually injured the Marquis. Every Featherwood Guard condensed a murderous aura. Hundreds and thousands of murderous auras condensed together, causing the enemy to tremble in fear. Kill! Ouyang Shua swept left and right, eliminating the enemy troops that had already rushed to the top of the city wall. Wang Feng, here! Wang Feng, covered in blood, hurried over. He had been staying near Ouyang Shua. Led a vanguard squadron and clear the trash on the city wall. Yes, the enemy troops that had just surged up had already caused an impact on the Featherwood Guard's defensive line. If they were not cleaned up, the entire line could collapse at any time. Wang Feng also understood and led a squadron to clean up along the road. He was not good at leading troops in a battle, but when it came to killing the enemy, Wang Feng was simply a god of death. This Featherwood general's eyes were blood red, and his entire body was covered in blood. He was like a demon that had walked out of hell. The Featherwood Guard that followed behind him was the same. The Featherwood Guard's valiance was displayed in front of the world for the first time. After Wang Feng's cleaning up, the front line stabilized once more. Ouyang Shua nodded in satisfaction as he killed the enemy. Outside the city, Lien Po's expression was grave and stern. He felt that he had almost crushed the enemy troops just now. He hadn't expected that the enemy would stabilize their footing again. What a strong army. Even so, Lien Po wasn't shaken in the slightest. Instead, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Since there was a first time, there would certainly be a second time. His attack strategy was correct. The further back, the more the enemy troops would be unable to hold on. No matter where the danger appeared, it was enough to cause the entire line to collapse. Regarding this, Lien Po was brimming with confidence. What Lien Po could think of Ouyang Shua as the person involved naturally realized as well. Although Ouyang Shua couldn't be considered to have a military background, he had been at the side of a group of famous generals for a long time and was imperceptibly influenced by what he saw and heard. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the confidence to personally command the Featherwood Guard and the Imperial Guard Division. Ouyang Shua immediately had the platoon led by Wang Feng not return to their original defensive area, but instead continue with the cleaning work. Wherever there was danger, they would provide assistance. To put it bluntly, they were a firefighting team. The fires of war were still burning, and they were burning more and more fiercely. In the following battles, Ouyang Shua suffered several more injuries. Each time, he would simply take care of it and then return to the battlefield once more to bravely kill the enemy. After going through several heartache, the Featherwood Guard worshipped the Marquis even more. Their Marquis was an undefeated god of war. No one could defeat him. The enemy couldn't, and neither could their wounds. Ouyang Shua was leading the Featherwood Guard to condense a military soul. An undefeated military soul. To be continued. Chapter 420. P.S. I apologize to the Alliance leader, south of Rosy Clouds. South of Rosy Clouds is also the first protector, the first elder, and the first sect leader. He has taken the first blood of many fans. He is an amazing person. Thank you. In the sky above Anyang City, the sky was filled with blood-red light. The flames of war had been burning from morning to evening. They were still as vigorous as before, never to be extinguished. The soaring blood-red light complemented the sunset in the sky. It was like a dream, like an illusion. It was like weeping and complaining. Amidst the flames of war, the inconspicuous Anyang City still stood tall. Lien Pa sat on his warhorse, his brows furrowed. The tenacity of the enemy was beyond his imagination. In the entire afternoon, there were 3 or 4 times when the army was about to take down the city walls, but they were beaten back again and again. They were truly an iron army. Lien Pa thought of the River East warriors who had displayed their might on the battlefield. Perhaps only they could be compared to the enemy in front of him. Although he was deeply moved, Lien Pa's brows furrowed even tighter. Although his lord did not say anything, nor did she criticize him, Lien Pa could feel his lord's dissatisfaction with the situation of the war and his dissatisfaction with Lien Pa. An army of 30,000 had attacked fiercely for an entire afternoon, yet they could not take down the tiny Anyang City. If this dragged on, there might be changes. In just one afternoon, more than 7,000 soldiers had died in battle. Such a large number of casualties was truly terrifying. The foot of Anyang City's western city wall had turned into a gloomy morgue. Blood flowed like a river. Flocks of vultures circled in the sky, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Under the reflection of the blood-red light, even the sunset seemed demonic. The circling vultures' eyes flashed with a red light under the sunset. Affected by the blood chi, some of the vultures had already gone berserk, flying down to peck at the delicious food, without regard for anything else. On top of the city wall, the Lord's flag of the Mountain Sea territory was still fluttering in the wind, never fading and becoming increasingly brighter. The guardian of the flag, the soldiers of the Featherwood Guard, also stood firm. In this battle, only a few of the 1,400 aristocratic family guards were left, and only a few of them were left. The elites brought by Baiwa and Feng Qiuhuang had also suffered heavy losses. Compared to the Featherwood Guard, they were not weak in terms of combat strength. They were only weak in terms of morale and courage. The 3,000 Featherwood Guard now had a common military spirit. That towering scarlet figure was the soul of their army. From that moment on, every member of the Featherwood Guard was willing to die for the Marquis. He would not regret it even in death. On this day, another 500 Featherwood Guards left forever. The red sun set in the west, and the last ray of sunset disappeared into the distant horizon. Night was coming. Lien pulled out a long sigh. Retreat. Yes, sir. Amidst the rumbling, the soldiers who were still attacking the city retreated like the tide. When they passed by the corpses of their comrades, all that was left in their hearts was joy and exhaustion. They could not imagine that the enemy on the city wall seemed to never tire. Old General Lien Pa took one last look at the top of the city wall before turning his horse around and heading back to the camp. Tomorrow morning, No matter what price he had to pay, he had to take down Anyang City. Lien Po's eyes flashed with killing intent. Anyang City, city lord residence. Ouyang Shaw, who was worshipped and eulogized by the soldiers, was scolded as soon as he returned to the city governor's mansion. Bai Hua and Feng Xiao Huang carefully treated his wounds with heartache. Ouch! Suddenly, Ouyang Shaw cried out in pain. Feng Xiao Huang had patted his wounds. Who told you to show off? Tears flashed in Feng Xiao Huang's eyes. Intoxicated beauty, a woman's love. Young man, when should he sigh? Shepherd's flute, sand continent pipa. Tears of beauty, heartbroken. Not to mention the romance of youth. Not to mention the tears of separation. Eva Bai Hua had a lot of complaints about Ouyang Shua. Wui, do you know how important you are to Shanghai City, to the alliance of mountains and seas, and even to the entire Qin dynasty? A gentleman does not stand under a collapsing wall. Do I need to tell you that? Of course I do, but no buts. We could just retreat from Anyang City. Up until now, we still have the upper hand. There's no need to put everything on the line and put ourselves in danger. That's right. Feng Xiao Huang agreed with a dissatisfied expression. Ouyang Shua shook his head and said, how should I put it? Do you know how long it will take for Bai Qi to complete his plan if we miss this opportunity? How many people will die during this time? Silence, deathly silence. It wasn't because they were great or compassionate. It was because their warriors would definitely be on the death list, and they would be the majority. That was how cruel war was. After a long while, Ouyang Shua broke the silence and said, there must be an expert behind Di Chen's ambush. That's why we can't let Di Chen succeed. Otherwise, it's hard to say who will win and who will lose. An expert? That's right. Bai Qi's plan was so obscure, but it was seen through by this person. Who could it be? Think about it. Who in the anti-Qin dynasty can fight against Bai Qi? Wu Qi. No. Ouyang Shua shook his head. If it's Wu Qi, it wouldn't be Di Chun, but Xiongba. It's him? Suddenly, Bai Hua and Feng Xiao Huang thought of a person. The two women were knowledgeable. Back then, the overlord had studied history and guessed who it was. Ouyang Shua nodded and said, that's right. It must be Han Xin. Feng Xiao Huang was unconvinced. How can you be so sure? Because it's Di Chun. Ouyang Shua said confidently. As the representative of the mutants, only Di Chun has the qualifications to contact Han Xin. Ouyang Shua had been the representative of the mutants 4 times, so he was very familiar with the authority of a mutant. Maybe it's Lianpa? Feng Xiao Huang was still unconvinced. Lianpa? If Lianpa could think of that, he wouldn't have waited until now to attack Anyang City. Ouyang Shua's eyes were unreadable. Although Lianpa and Bai Qi were the 4 great generals of the Warring States period, there was still a gap between them. That makes sense. Han Xin is a ferocious person. Ouyang Shua's eyes flashed with envy. If he really fights against Bai Qi, who knows how long this battle will take. So, we must hold on until Wang Li's army arrives. Ouyang Shua's tone was firm. The two women looked at each other, speechless. They couldn't bring themselves to say anything more. Wui, is there anything we can help with? Yes. Ouyang Shua's words were shocking. Speak. The 2 girls were excited and couldn't wait. Did you forget that we still have 4 ferocious people in our team? Ouyang Shua smiled and said, if they are willing to help, our chances of winning will be higher. Yeah. How could we forget about Zhou Bo and the others? With 3 ferocious people joining us, wouldn't it be like adding wings to a tiger? Don't be happy too early. Ouyang Shua shook his head and poured cold water on them. The knot in their hearts won't be solved so easily. Don't worry, leave it to us. Feng Xiao Huang was full of confidence. She might not be good at fighting, but she was confident in ideological work. Bai Hua's eyes also flashed with a hint of brilliance. Then I'll wait and see. Feng Xiao Huang turned around and left the study with Bai Hua. After the 2 girls left, a young officer walked into the study. Marquis. It was the accompanying intelligence officer from the intelligence department. He looked at Marquis with admiration. Marquis's actions in the afternoon had already spread throughout the army. Any reply from Wang Li's army? Yes. The officer handed over Wang Li's reply. Ouyang Shua opened it, and his brows relaxed. In the letter, Wang Li had issued a military order that the 50,000 vanguards would arrive at Anyang before noon tomorrow. You're dismissed. Yes, sir. The officer left. A trace of worry flashed across Ouyang Shua's face. Although they won the battle during the day, it was a Pyrrhic victory. Even if they could resist tomorrow morning, the Featherwood Guards would be crippled. More importantly, he was exposed in front of the anti-Qin camp. Ouyang Shua couldn't imagine what would happen if an army of 100,000 besieged Anyang. If that happened, he could only abandon the city and escape. Otherwise, he would lose everything if he was captured. It was difficult. How could he solve this predicament? He couldn't retreat, and he couldn't defend. Forget it, I'll leave it to Bai Qi. My mission is to defend. Thinking of this, Ouyang Shua waved his pen and wrote a secret letter to Bai Qi. In the letter, Ouyang Shua described the battle situation and the movements of Wang Li's army in detail. Ouyang Shua stated that he would defend Anyang until reinforcements arrived. As for the task of restraining Xiang Yu's army, it would be Bai Qi's responsibility. Presumably, Bai Qi would think of a way. After all, Ouyang Shua only wanted Bai Qi to buy him half a day. Under the curtain of night, the bustling Anyang city regained its peace. All the ugliness was covered by the darkness of the night. Outside the city, Di Chen's camp. Di Chen was alone in his tent, drinking to drown his sorrows. A huge sense of frustration surged in Di Chen's heart with the help of alcohol. Di Chen didn't expect the trump card of Shanghai City to be so powerful. Compared to them, the elites he was so proud of weren't even worth a fart. The most despairing thing in the world wasn't losing to an opponent. It was climbing a mountain and thinking that he had caught up with his opponent, only to find that his opponent had climbed a higher mountain. He looked up to the mountain. No. A fierce light flashed in Di Chen's eyes. According to his observation, based on today's situation, the army might not be able to take Anyang City even tomorrow. Di Chen didn't dare to gamble anymore. Since you're so confident, then let's face the vast army. Thinking of this, Di Chen quickly wrote a secret letter. After thinking for a while, he wrote a second letter. Guards, here, send this letter to General Xiang overnight. Tell him that it's an urgent military matter. Yes, sir. Di Chen took out the second secret letter and said, give this letter to General Han. Understood. The guards were Di Chen's absolute confidants. They knew about Han Xian's existence. Go. Di Chen waved his hand, a strange look in his eyes. Tomorrow, it would be another tit-for-tat battle. To be continued. Chapter 421. It was a long night. Jiyuan City, City Lord Manor. Ouyang Shua's secret letter was delivered to Bai Qi's desk in less than 2 hours. Bai Qi opened the letter and read it. He muttered to himself, is it Han Xian? Interesting. Men, here, summon him for a meeting. Yes, sir. The personal guard did not dare to slack off and immediately went to inform the generals. Even though it was late at night, none of the generals dared to complain about the meeting. It was common for generals to be woken up in the middle of the night due to the urgency of the situation. In less than 15 minutes, Zhang Han, Eli, Zhang Liao, Qin Xiong, Wang Bei, Lin Yi, and the other generals gathered in the City Lord Manor's conference hall. These generals knew Bai Qi's style of doing things, so they didn't dare to delay. On the other hand, the generals of the other lords arrived late, causing Bai Qi to frown. Who dares to accept Xiang Yu's challenge tomorrow? As soon as he finished speaking, the generals couldn't react in time and were all stunned. Didn't the general refuse to accept Xiang Yu's challenge? Why did his attitude suddenly take a 180-degree turn? Bai Qi sat at the head of the table expressionlessly. General, I wish. Eli was the first to step forward. He wouldn't pursue the matter. Xiang Yu's provocations outside the city over the past few days had left Eli feeling stifled. Good. Bai Qi nodded in satisfaction, as expected of one of his generals. Who else? My wish. Zhang Liao, Qin Xiong, Wang Bei, and the other generals requested to accept the challenge. All of them had been suppressing their anger for a long time. Very well. Bai Qi raised his head and looked around. Tomorrow, General Eli, General Zhang Liao, General Qin Xiong, and General Wang Bei will face Xiang Yu. Yes, sir. The generals who were called were all overjoyed. Those who weren't called, such as Lin Yi, were dejected. After the generals left, Bai Qi stayed behind to discuss the matter with Lin Yi. A moment later, Lin Yi left the tent. Under the cover of the night, the Imperial Guard Division quietly left the city and disappeared into the night. Only the Imperial Guard Division, who had undergone strict combat training, had the confidence to march in the night. Night, Anyang City. In addition to sending a letter to Bai Qi, Ouyang Shua did not just sit and wait for his death. After the battle ended, the two women mobilized the citizens of the city to clean up the battlefield. The corpses at the top of the city wall were cleaned up so that they would not affect the soldiers' positioning. Most importantly, the stones and logs that were thrown out of the city in the afternoon were also retrieved by the commoners from the pile of corpses and moved back to the top of the city wall. Ouyang Shua had no other choice. The resources to defend the city were scarce, so he could only resort to this. As for digging up the moat again, firstly, the people in the city did not have the ability to do so. Secondly, it would easily alarm the enemy on the other side of the moat. The gains did not make up for the losses. Other than that, Bai Hua and Feng Xiuhuang had to be mentioned. During the day, in addition to organizing meals, the two ladies also did something big. Less than 10% of Anyang's citizens survived. Naturally, there were many empty houses. The two ladies decisively ordered the people to demolish all the empty houses to obtain stones and wood. Throughout the day, hundreds of houses in Anyang City were demolished. Taking advantage of the darkness, the stones and logs that were cleared were transported to the top of the city wall. In this way, they would have ample supplies to defend the city the next day. Ouyang Shua could not help but admire the intelligence of the two ladies. They worked until the second half of the night before Anyang City regained its peace. Even so, the people in the city could not sleep peacefully. As long as they were not blind, they would know that there would be a tough battle waiting for them the next day. No matter which camp occupied Anyang City, the people who would suffer would be the people in the city. When the people prosper, the people suffer. When the people perish, the people suffer. These words were not false. Anti-Qin camp, Chu army camp. When Di Qin's messenger arrived at the camp, it was already the second half of the night. The entire camp was silent. Who is it? Before the messenger could get close to the camp, he was stopped by the patrolling guards. A messenger representing Di Qin from the mutants. We have urgent military news to report to General Xiang. Please inform him. The guard's tone was unfathomable as he said sinisterly, Di Qin's messenger? Yes. The messenger's tone was firm. As the representative of the mutants, Di Qin's status in the army was quite high. Unexpectedly, an accident happened. Humph, how dare you? The guard's expression changed as he shouted, Arrest him! Yes, sir. The four guards quickly tied up the messenger. What are you doing? The messenger was furious. He struggled and shouted, Can you bear the consequences of delaying military news? Tui. The guard spat and said, General has orders. Di Qin disobeyed orders and left his post without permission. He deserves to die. How dare he walk right into our trap? The messenger felt bitter when he heard this. His master had miscalculated Xiang Yu's character. Who was Xiang Yu? How arrogant. How could he allow others to challenge his authority in the army? Di Qin dared to disobey orders and was naturally wanted by Xiang Yu. The messenger was helpless. He no longer had the arrogance on his face. He said respectfully, Big Brother Guard, I have urgent military news to report to General Xiang. No, General is already asleep. He cannot be disturbed. The guard's attitude was firm. Big Brother Guard, please pass this secret letter to General Xiang. The messenger could only settle for the next best thing. The guard nodded and took the secret letter. He waved his hand and said, Take him away. Yes, sir. Big Brother Guard, you must pass this secret letter to General Xiang. This is urgent. The messenger was dragged away, but he still did not forget to turn around and give instructions. As for the secret letter to Han Xian, he could only leave it to fate. It was still lying in his arms. The guard would not listen to him. He kept the secret letter and continued his patrol. He did not dare to disturb the general at this time. The next morning, after Xiang Yu had washed up, he received the secret letter from the guard. After reading the secret letter, Xiang Yu was silent. Han Xian humph. Xiang Yu was not a fool. He immediately guessed the mastermind behind the scenes. This was a slap to his face. He had just mocked Han Xian's deduction, but it turned out that Han Xian's deduction was correct. How could he not embarrass Xiang Yu? I'll deal with you after this. Although he was angry, as the commander of the army, Xiang Yu still had to consider the big picture. He also knew that if the Qin army attacked them from both sides, they would be defeated immediately. Guards, here, bring Ingbu to see me. Yes, sir. After a while, Ingbu came to the tent. Ingbu, also known as Qing Bu, was punished by the Qin laws. He first belonged to Xiang Liang and later became a general under Xiang Yu. After the establishment of the Han dynasty, he was conferred the title of Duke of Huainan. Together with Han Xian and Peng Yu, they were known as the three great generals of the early Han dynasty. General, Xiang Yu nodded and briefly introduced the situation in Anyang. You will personally lead 50,000 soldiers to Anyang. You must take Anyang before the Qin army arrives. Don't worry, General. Ingbu was a fierce general, so he was naturally confident. If an army of 50,000 could not take down a small Anyang city, then he might as well kill himself. Just then, a report came from outside the tent. Come in. Reporting, General. The Qin army has sent a letter of challenge, saying that they are willing to accept your challenge. Good. Xiang Yu was overjoyed. These cowards have finally shown their faces. Men, put on your armor. Xiang Yu was overjoyed. He was about to put on his armor and go fight. When Ingbu heard this, he frowned and said, General, I was just about to reinforce Anyang when the Qin army accepted the challenge. Could there be a trap in this? Ingbu said carefully, afraid that Xiang Yu would misunderstand. Ha! Xiang Yu laughed. The Qin army must be trying to delay me so that we can't reinforce Anyang. How can such a simple plan work? No matter who the Qin army sends to fight, I will definitely be able to kill him. Xiang Yu was extremely domineering. He waved his hand and said, Go ahead. With me here, there won't be any trouble. Ingbu did not say anything else, so he nodded and left. After a while, the 50,000 soldiers headed straight for Anyang under Ingbu's command. Because they were going to attack the city, Ingbu had specially brought a large number of siege weapons. Because of this, Ingbu's army could not march as fast as Di Chen's army. The red sun rose, shining brightly. Under the morning light, Anyang was covered in a layer of golden light. Yesterday's bloodstains were hung on the city walls, speckled with spots. This was the best annotation for yesterday's battle. In the future, Anyang was destined to be remembered in history because of this battle. Facing the rising sun, Lien Po led the army to attack Anyang again. Although Di Chun had asked Xiang Yu for help, he still held a glimmer of hope that they could take Anyang before the reinforcements arrived. This time, Lien Po changed his strategy. Without the help of siege weapons, it was too difficult to take down the city walls. Lien Po set his sights on the city gates. Once the gates were breached, Anyang would be taken. The only problem was how to repair the city gate in a short period of time after taking it down. After all, if they occupied Anyang, they would still have to face the main force of the Qin army. In order to take Anyang, Lien Po could not care so much. The city gates were narrow, so he could not arrange for too many soldiers. Lien Po sent the most elite troops of Handan City to attack the city gates. The focus of the attack was still the west gate. As for the other gates, Lien Po did not care about them. Anyang was surrounded by water. To attack 2 or 3 gates at the same time, it meant that they had to fill up a few moats. With the number of soldiers they had, it was beyond their ability. That was why Lien Po had chosen to attack the west gate. Ouyang Shuo, wearing his signature scarlet cloak, arrived at the top of the city walls early. After a night of teasing and the medicine that Bien Ke personally made, Ouyang Shuo's external injuries were no longer a problem. Only the poison in his body was still stirring. Behind Ouyang Shuo, there were three more generals. They were Chao Can, Zhou Bo, and Xia Hoang. Ouyang Shuo could not understand what magic by Hua and Feng Xiu Huang had used last night to make Xiao He and the other three obediently submit. At this time, Xiao He was coordinating the logistics in the city. The flames of war were about to be reignited. To be continued. Chapter 422. Dong, dong, dong. Accompanied by the sound of war drums, the siege began. The huge military formation slowly advanced, a mountainous aura rushing towards them. When they reached the moat, the formation suddenly narrowed. The army passed through the water passage made of sandbags and appeared at the foot of the city wall. After crossing the single log bridge, the narrowed army suddenly spread out. In an instant, the densely packed army covered the entire west city wall, leaving no gap. The whole process was as smooth as flowing water. It must be said that Lien Po's ability to command an army was really amazing. To be able to command an alliance army that was hastily formed in such an orderly manner, this was the quality of a great general. Those generals who only knew how to lead the charge were just boorish men. The elites of Handan City mixed in the army, carrying huge logs and headed straight for the city gate. Seeing this, Ouyang Shuo stood on the city wall and smiled coldly. He had expected this. On top of the west city gate, there was a small mountain of stones. Apart from that, a Yulin guard was on standby, specially in charge of defending the city gate. As soon as the enemy neared the city gate, a sky full of arrows and a huge amount of stones came pouring down. The rain of arrows was still fine. Most of the troops were blocked by the shields and did not cause too many casualties. After all, a Yulin guard was still too few to form a cohesive effect. The most dangerous thing was the stones that came crashing down. Huge stones fell from the sky, crashing down with the force of a thunderbolt. When the huge stones hit the shields, they were flattened along with the shields. Clang! The soldiers who were hit directly vomited blood and fell to the ground, unable to get up again. A huge amount of huge stones came crashing down like raindrops, making a series of dull, crashing sounds. Just like whack-a-mole, each stone could take away a life. The soldiers of the Yulin Guard were not ordinary commoners. Not only were they extremely strong, but they were also very adept at controlling their strength. The stones that were thrown were ruthless and accurate. The elites of Handan City also had a backbone. None of them let out a scream. They pushed against the huge stones and tried to attack the city gate. Unfortunately, just as they reached the city gate, the troops suffered heavy losses. The entire huge log was swaying left and right, unable to form a cohesive force. The impact on the city gate was like a tickle. The narrow city gate became a meat grinder. Bam! 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 The endless stream of boulders was enough to make one despair. Before they even attacked the city gates, the elites of Handan City had already suffered heavy losses. Di Chen's face twitched as he watched the battle from afar. These were the elites that he had carefully trained. The old general, Lien Po, was still expressionless. He continued to send teams of elites to the execution ground resolutely, replacing the teams that were already paralyzed. He did not believe that the other party would prepare so many stones. During yesterday's siege, Lien Po had observed that in the second half of the battle, there were almost no stones falling from the top of the city walls, indicating that the defensive resources in the city were almost exhausted. Unfortunately, Lien Po was destined to regret it. No matter how many soldiers Lien Po sent, it was useless. The boulders at the top of the city wall seemed to be inexhaustible, rumbling and crashing down. Half an hour later, the city gate was completely blocked by huge rocks, piled up into a small hill. Mixed in between the cracks of the rocks was the flesh and blood of the soldiers. If they wanted to hit the city gate, they had to move the stones. This was an almost impossible task. No matter how many elites there were in Handan City, no matter how fearless they could not just throw away their lives like this. Lien Po's plan to attack the city gate had officially failed. The design of ancient cities was very particular, especially the city gate. This was the weakest point of the city, so there were more ways to break through it. If the city gate could be broken through so easily, the army would not have chosen the siege ladders during the siege. In a siege battle, there were many times when the troops attacking the city would rather use catapults to smash a hole in the city wall than attack from the city gate. This was the root of the problem. The defense of the city gate by the city guards had reached a ridiculous level. Not only that, even if they were lucky enough to break through the city gate, there would be specialized defense equipment that could block the city gate in an instant. Lien Po, of course, understood this. He had calculated that the enemy's defensive resources were limited. He did not expect that all the houses in Anyang City would be demolished to store resources. Facing such a difficult opponent, Lien Po had a headache. Even so, Lien Po was not fazed. As the general, his will was as hard as steel. Since he could not take down the city gate, Lien Po would attack the city walls. As long as he did not care about the price, he would be able to take down the city. Lien Po did not doubt this at all. Di Chun was very magnanimous. At this time, he did not interfere with Lien Po's command. He knew that if the princess and the general had different opinions, it would be a disaster. Since the battle had started, he could only choose to believe in Lien Po. The army of Shanghai City had suffered heavy losses yesterday. Today, it was indeed more difficult to defend the city. Di Chen's troops had suffered heavy losses, but the number of soldiers attacking the city did not decrease. The only thing that decreased was the number of shifts. Lien Po hardened his heart and continuously pressured the army, reducing their rest time. As long as the general's will was strong, the army would not collapse. Under Lien Po's command, the army was like a whole, constantly attacking the city. The continuous attacks made Anyang City seem to be in imminent danger. Unfortunately, what Lien Po did not know was that there were 3 more generals guarding the city walls today. This mistake in intelligence was almost fatal to the judgment of the battle situation. Yesterday, Ouyang Shuo was the only axis of the entire army, so they could not attend to one thing and lose sight of another. But now it was different. Ouyang Shuo and Zhou Bo each occupied a defensive area, forming a defensive chain. 4 points and 1 line, indestructible. In a battle to defend the city, the role of a fierce general could not be underestimated. Zhou Bo fought at the top of the city walls, with the momentum of 1 man holding the pass against 10,000 men. No one could climb up to the top of the city walls within 5 meters. The general's ferocity was very obvious to the soldiers. The Featherwood Guard became braver as they fought. Every Featherwood Guard was a cold butcher, treating the enemy as if they were nothing. The top of Anyang City was like a black hole, constantly devouring the lives of the soldiers. Not only that, under Xiao He's control, large amounts of stones and wood were still being transported to the top of the city walls. Xiao He wanted to raze Anyang City to the ground. Xiao He declared in the city, with the enemy's nature, if the city was breached after such heavy losses, they would slaughter the entire city. The citizens in the city were so scared that they wanted to offer up their coffins. Bai Hua and Feng Xiuhuang could not help but be dumbfounded. What was professionalism? This was professionalism. This small change made the defense of the city in the morning even easier than yesterday afternoon. As time passed, Lien Po could no longer remain calm. Damn it, what kind of army was he facing? How could they be so tenacious? Di Chen's face was also frighteningly gloomy. At this moment, his allies could no longer sit still. They had lost 2,000 to 3,000 soldiers in exchange for a pitiful amount of contribution points. This was a huge loss. Supreme Alliance leader, I think we need an explanation. One of the lords could no longer hold it in and questioned Di Chun. He had brought 3,000 soldiers, but now there were less than 1,000 left. How could he not feel the pain? That's right. Supreme Alliance leader, we only followed you because we trusted you. What's going on now? There's no hope of victory at all. Faced with these doubts, Di Chun was speechless. Speaking of which, these allies could already be considered to have been patient, only making trouble now. Everyone! Di Chun waved his hand and said in a deep voice, Everyone, for today's losses, I will definitely compensate you after the battle. I will not go back on my word. This. The lords looked at each other. It had to be said that Di Chun was indeed generous. Logically speaking, following Di Chun was completely voluntary. In a war, there would be victory and defeat, and no one could blame anyone. Even so, Di Chun did not shirk the responsibility and truly showed the elegance of the aristocratic family. This was indeed a beautiful move. After comforting his allies, Di Chun rode to Lien Po's side. Master! Seeing Di Chun, Lien Po looked ashamed. Di Chun waved his hand and said, "It's not General's fault. The enemy is too tenacious." Lien Po's face softened slightly, and his heart was filled with gratitude. He thought that this time he would definitely be reprimanded. After all, last night he made a military pledge in front of the master. He never thought that things would turn out like this. Withdraw the army. Hearing this, Di Chun felt a weight lifted off his shoulders. He simply admitted defeat and no longer struggled. Master, Lien Po was shocked, and his heart was unwilling. Withdraw the army. Di Chun said again, his tone firm. Hearing this, Lien Po's expression was complicated. He also knew that if they continued to fight, they would not be able to take Anyang City. Instead of that, it was better to reduce some losses earlier. Not everyone had the courage and boldness to cut their losses. This defeat was due to the lack of intelligence. They did not expect that Anyang City would be guarded by the Qin army, and they did not bring any siege weapons. Otherwise, no matter how tenacious the enemy was, Anyang City would definitely not be able to defend. In the rumbling sound, the army retreated again. Waves of cheers came from the top of Anyang City. At this moment, the rumbling of horse hooves came from the distant sky. Looking in the direction of the sound, they saw an army like a black tide surging towards Anyang City. The cheers at the top of the city came to an abrupt end. Oh my God, is it another anti-Qin army? The appearance of such an army at this time was simply a disaster for Anyang City. Even Ouyang Shua's heart could not help but tremble. He looked up at the sky and saw that there was still 1 or 2 hours before noon. This meant that Wang Li's vanguard would need at least an hour to reach Anyang City. Could the current few thousand people hold them off for an hour? Ouyang Shua's expression was unprecedentedly serious. At the same time, Ouyang Shua was faintly looking forward to it. On the contrary, Di Chun and the others were excited, especially Di Chun. According to his calculations, if the reinforcements left early in the morning, they should have arrived by now. The heavens have not forsaken me. Di Chun let out a long sigh, rejoicing in his heart. Rejoicing that he was not arrogant last night, and lowered his head to ask Xiangyu for help. Otherwise, he would really become a laughingstock. The rumbling army came from afar and headed straight for them. To be continued. Chapter 423. The rumbling of horse hooves came closer and closer. The mysterious army finally revealed itself. Upon closer inspection, it wasn't the volunteer army, but Lin Yi's Janissary division. Last night, the Imperial Guard division had quietly left the city, specially taking the mountain roads and quietly passing through the anti-Qin camp's defensive zone. Finally, they had arrived at Anyang ahead of the Yingbu army. Lin Yi let out a long sigh of relief when he saw the flag of Shanghai City on top of the city. At least he wasn't late. If the marquis was captured, Lin Yi would have no choice but to apologize with his life. Everyone charge. Lin Yi raised his spear and gave the order to charge. Kill. Their lances were lifted up one by one, gleaming with a cold light. The high-speed charging army set off billowing smoke and dust. At this time, the Dichen army had just retreated from the top of the city walls and was at their most relaxed moment. They had never thought that they would be attacked outside the city, when they realized that the incoming army was not reinforcements but enemies. It was too late. The distance of 2 to 3 li was covered in the blink of an eye. Even with Lien Po's abilities, he would not be able to reform the formation in a short period of time. The moment he saw the Imperial Guard division, Lien Po knew that the army was finished. There was no way out. Lien Po patted his horse and came to Di Chen's side. He said in an urgent voice, "My lord, let's go. It'll be too late if we stay any longer." The entire army was in chaos. If they stayed any longer, they would definitely die. The moment he saw the Imperial Guard regiment, Di Chin's smile froze on his face. He couldn't imagine why the army of Shanghai City would come. Weren't they still holed up in Jiyuan City? How could this be? Could they reach Anyang before Xiang Yu's army? How could this be? Di Chin couldn't believe his own eyes. The change happened so fast that he was caught unprepared. Leave? Where are we going? Di Chin was in a daze, as if he had lost his soul. In the face of such a huge blow, Di Chin almost collapsed. F***, his demeanor. Di Chin wanted to curse out, loud, to vent the frustration in his heart. Seeing this, Lien Pa tried to persuade. Where there's life, there's hope. Huh? Di Chin sneered, completely ignoring him. Quick, cover the Lord's escape. Seeing this, Lien Pa could only forcefully take Di Chin away. Yes, sir. Receiving the order, the guards took Di Chin and fled in panic. The other lords had long since slipped away under the protection of their personal guards. The scene was spectacular. On the city walls of Anyang. Marquis, look, it's the Imperial Guard. Wang Feng came to Ouyang Shua's side and pointed at the army outside the city, beaming with joy. In a short time, the Featherwood Guard had fallen from heaven to hell, and then back to heaven again. It simply couldn't be more exciting. Ouyang Shua nodded. Bai Qi was still as reliable as ever. Wang Feng was tempted. Marquis, should we go out of the city to kill them? No. Ouyang Shua shook his head and firmly said, firmly guarding Anyang City is the most important task. Don't give rise to new problems. Leave the enemy forces outside the city to the Imperial Guard Division. Yes, sir. From the reaction of the Revolutionary Army, Ouyang Shua guessed that Di Chin must have asked for reinforcements. Unfortunately, the Imperial Guard Division had arrived a step earlier. At this moment, Ouyang Shua unnaturally had to hold his ground. How could it be a battle outside the city? It was simply a massacre. The Imperial Guard Division that had launched the assault was too terrifying. They were like a pack of hungry wolves that had charged into a flock of sheep, wantonly killing. The sheep were panic-stricken and ran in all directions, unable to put up any resistance. Di Chin's army could also be considered an elite force, but unfortunately, the successive attacks had caused the army to completely collapse. The retreat of the commander had caused the army to fall apart. Lien Pa and the others led the cavalry troops and hurriedly retreated from the battlefield. The infantry that remained naturally became lambs waiting to be slaughtered. The Imperial Guard Division's massacre was undoubtedly efficient. Ouyang Shua stood on the city wall and looked at his personal interface. His contribution points and experience points were constantly rising, and he simply couldn't stop them. After the second system update, there had been amendments to the campaign. One of them was to remove the setting where experience points couldn't be obtained on the campaign map. After the battle, Ouyang Shua's personal level, which had remained stagnant until now, had directly increased by several levels. After a player's personal level surpassed level 60, adventure-type players would have to continuously train for half a month to increase by one level. For Ouyang Shua, leveling up was no different from crawling at a snail's pace if there was no battle. Compared to personal experience points, Ouyang Shua was more concerned about the contribution points. Ouyang Shua checked. As of now, his contribution points had already reached a terrifying 458,530 points, surpassing the total contribution points he had earned in the Battle of Chongping. He was ranked at the top, and no one could shake him. In other words, in the Shanghai City Army, each soldier had killed 2 people on average, which was truly terrifying. The accumulated contribution points were obtained by the Imperial Guard Division and the Mountain Barbarian Heavy Infantry Brigade on the battlefield, as well as by the Featherwood Guard along the way. The 3,000 Featherwood Guards had experienced more battles than the Imperial Guard Division and earned a lot of contribution points. Just on the city wall of Anyang, they had earned no less than 70,000 to 80,000 contribution points. The massacre outside Anyang City was even more horrifying. Seeing such a generous amount of contribution points, Ouyang Shua's thoughts turned to the campaign mall. Up until now, he hadn't exchanged for a single item. Light Armor Manufacturing Technique Manual, priced at 40,000 contribution points. Buy. The light armor was the brilliant light armor. Like the radiant armor, it was a type of armor from the Tang dynasty. Ouyang Shuo bought the light armor to enrich the armors in his territory. There were as many as 13 types of armors from the Tang dynasty. In comparison, the armors in the armor workshop of the combat division were pitifully few. With the experience of forging the radiant armor, the armor workshop was naturally familiar with forging the light armor. Ancient Farming Tools Manufacturing Technical Manual, priced at 100,000 contribution points. Buy. Ancient farming tools might not seem eye-catching, but there were actually many types, no less than 30 to 40 types. They involved all aspects of agricultural production, and their effects were extraordinary. A few simple examples. Crooked plow, a farming tool that first appeared in the Dongjiang area during the late Tang dynasty. Kongming cart, a prototype created in the Eastern Han dynasty and perfected in the Three Kingdoms. Three-legged centipede, a three-legged centipede that appeared in the Western Han dynasty. It was a type of seeding machine. China had been an agricultural country since ancient times. The invention and improvement of farming tools had accompanied the agricultural civilization for thousands of years. Ancient Farming Tools Manufacturing Technical Manual was the crystallization of ancient agricultural wisdom. It was priced at 100,000 contribution points, which was not expensive at all. With this manual, the agricultural production level of the Shanghai territory would rise to a new level. Food was the most important thing to the people. Agriculture could never be overestimated. As for the other items, Ouyang Shuo was not interested in them. What he needed the most right now was a sword art manual. Unfortunately, the sword arts in the market were only gold level. Naturally, Ouyang Shuo was not interested in them. Not just gold level, he would even have to consider a king level sword art. After purchasing, Ouyang Shuo closed the market. Outside Anyang City, it was a scene of killing. In less than an hour and a half, the 20,000 Dichun soldiers were completely wiped out. Other than the 5,000 cavalry and a small number of soldiers who escaped into the forest, the rest were all killed by the Forbidden Division. Ouyang Shuo stood on top of the city wall and nodded in satisfaction. Open the gate. Yes. After a while, Wang Feng turned back. HM? Reporting to Marquis, the west gate has been blocked by rocks. We can't open it. Ouyang Shuo was slightly embarrassed. Signal the Forbidden Division. Tell them to enter the city from the south gate. Yes. After Wang Feng left, Ouyang Shuo also stood up and left. He was going to the south gate to welcome them. Before leaving, Ouyang Shuo called Zhou Bo, Chao Can, and Xiao Hoing over. The three generals had made great contributions in this battle. Having witnessed the bravery and ferocity of the Imperial Guard Division, the three of them secretly rejoiced and sighed. Such an elite army was really amazing. The Featherwood Guard's performance in the past 2 days was already amazing enough, but their numbers were too few. Zhou Bo and the others didn't expect the Shanghai Army's division to be so fierce. Zhou Bo looked at Xiao Hoing with a trace of envy in his eyes. Xiao Hoing slightly puffed out his chest. He looked at the Marquis in front of him, no longer holding any grudges. Ouyang Shuo's performance yesterday had already won the approval of Xiao He and Xiao Hoing. A Marquis was able to take the lead and was brave and resourceful. What more could he ask for? Even Liu Bang might not be as good as Ouyang Shuo. Xiao He, in particular, had observed the most and was the most emotional. Other than Bai Hua and Feng Qiuhuang's persuasion, the main reason he could come out today was Ouyang Shuo's performance. At the south gate, Lin Yi led the Forbidden Division in formation at the city gate. When they saw Ouyang Shuo, they immediately got off their horses and saluted. Greetings, Marquis. Tens of thousands of cavalrymen got off their horses and saluted at the same time. The scene was quite shocking. Xiao Hoing and the others behind Ouyang Shuo focused their gazes again. Ouyang Shuo nodded and calmly accepted. After a simple welcome, Ouyang Shuo brought Lin Yi to the mayor's mansion. Under Wang Feng's arrangement, the soldiers of the Forbidden Division began to set up defenses in the city. The anti-Qin army could attack at any time, and now is far from the time to relax. But with the Forbidden Division in charge, Ouyang Shua didn't need to lead the troops. After a series of battles, Ouyang Shua could faintly feel that he couldn't suppress the poison in his body. If one looked closely, there were faint traces of green veins on his face. The poison caused waves of pain in Ouyang Shua's abdomen. In order not to worry the soldiers, he could only forcefully endure it. Cold sweat seeped out of his forehead. With Lin Yi's sharp senses, he immediately noticed Marquis's abnormality. "Marquis, you? I'm fine." Ouyang Shua waved his hand and sat down in the meeting room of the mayor's mansion. He said, "Tell me, does the general have any instructions for me?" "Yes." Lin Yi didn't dare to delay. He immediately took out a secret letter and handed it to Marquis. Ouyang Shua took a look and didn't say anything. The war had developed to this point, and it was time to pull in the net. To be continued. Chapter 424. After a while, Xiao He, Bai Hua, and Feng Qiuhuang walked into the meeting hall. "Marquis." Xiao He bowed to Ouyang Shua. Ouyang Shua raised his head to glance at Xiao He, then nodded in satisfaction and said, "Sit." Everyone was discussing the post-war matters in the meeting hall. At this moment, a report came from outside. "Report. Come in." "Marquis, Wang Li's army has arrived outside the city." "Good." Ouyang Shua was overjoyed. Wang Li was not a bastard and arrived on time. With this, Anyang's crisis was completely resolved. Wang Li personally led the 50,000 vanguard to attack Anyang City at around 11 in the morning. The army camped outside the city. Only Wang Li brought 2 of his personal guards to the Lord's residence to meet Ouyang Shua. Since Wang Li was not his subordinate, Ouyang Shua calmly replied and did not reprimand Wang Li. According to Wang Li, the main army of 100,000 was on the way to Anyang City with a large amount of rations. The army would reach Anyang City by tomorrow afternoon at the latest. Ouyang Shua heaved a sigh of relief that the rations were secure. Otherwise, the tens of thousands of soldiers in Anyang City would starve in a few days. After the small talk, Ouyang Shua quickly planned the next step of the battle. Defending without attacking was not Ouyang Shua's style. Ouyang Shua immediately ordered Wang Li's army to hide in the forest outside the West Gate. He wanted to prepare a big gift for the reinforcements of the anti-Qin camp. After everything was prepared, Ingbu's army arrived outside Anyang City in less than half an hour. How dangerous! When Ingbu led his troops outside the city, he frowned when he saw the tragic scene outside. Something was wrong. Was the mutant army annihilated? According to the intelligence, the Qin army should not have been able to annihilate the mutant army. Could it be that the Qin army had reinforcements? When Ingbu saw the Lord's flag, his expression became gloomy. "General, what should we do now?" "Continue to attack the city." "Attack the city?" "The situation is unclear. I'm afraid it's inappropriate to attack the city." "It's precisely because the situation is unclear that we have to attack the city." "I'm slow-witted." Ingbu calmed his expression and said, "Launch a probing attack on the city wall to find out the enemy's strength." "General is wise." Ingbu was unmoved and said, "I have already made a military pledge in front of General Xiang. There is no way out. No matter what, we have to take down Anyang City. Do you understand?" "Understood." A large number of siege weapons were pushed to the front. On top of the city wall, the Imperial Guard Division had already taken over the Featherwood Guard's defense mission. The first to show their might were the arrow towers, siege ladders, and a few catapults. With the help of the siege weapons, the British Army launched a probing attack. The attack was exceptionally smooth. A large number of soldiers climbed onto the city walls and engaged in a bloody battle with the Imperial Guard Division. When Ingbu saw this, a smile flashed across his face. Sure enough, the enemy had also suffered heavy losses. They didn't even have basic supplies to defend the city. Attack the city with all your might. Having made up his mind, Ingbu naturally would not give the enemy any more opportunities. "Yes, sir." The mighty army surged towards the top of the city wall, wave after wave. The defensive resources at the top of the city wall were indeed running low and had basically been used up. The soldiers of the Imperial Guard Division had traveled through the night and then had to fight a big battle. Their stamina could not keep up. More importantly, Lenny had received orders from a marquis to draw the Ingbu army to the top of the city wall. With the Imperial Guard Division's cooperation, Ingbu's army naturally won the first battle. The two armies clashed at the top of the city wall. Ingbu was also a general. Once he sensed the enemy's weakness, he would not give them any chance to breathe and launched a barrage of attacks. The Imperial Guard Division was not to be trifled with and immediately returned the favor. Just as the two armies were engaged in battle, Wang Li's army, hidden in the forest, moved out. Wang Li's army had traveled day and night and was exhausted. After a short break in the forest, they were all refreshed. Wang Li's army was made up of light cavalry, and like a sharp knife, they suddenly stabbed into the Ingbu army from the back. At this time, more than half of the Ingbu army had reached the foot of the city wall. Wang Li's attack threw Ingbu's army into chaos. Ingbu never would have thought that there would be an attack from the back. He did not even put up any defenses, and instead arranged for guards on the flanks. Not good. We've fallen into a trap. Ingbu's face turned pale with fright. He wanted to reorganize his army, but it was too late. Ingbu. Wang Li had been staring at Ingbu for a long time. He took the lead and shouted at Ingbu. Hearing this, Ingbu flew into a rage. He hated it when people called him Ingbu. Wang Li, you idiot! The two generals clashed. Ingbu was a fierce general, but Wang Li was not easy to deal with either. He was the descendant of a general family. Sparks flew the moment they came into contact. It would take at least 100 rounds to determine the victor. Unfortunately, time waited for no man. The Ingbu army that was attacking the city did not know what to do and could only retreat to reinforce the main army. The retreating Ingbu army joined up with the main army, and with no one to command them, it was simply chaos on top of chaos. Wang Li's army recklessly killed their way through the enemy, not to kill them, but to completely confuse them, making it impossible for them to regroup. At this time, the reorganized Yulin Guard took a detour from the south gate and ruthlessly stabbed into the Ingbu army. With the two attacks, the Ingbu army was immediately routed. In a chaotic battle, once an army was thrown into chaos, there was no possibility of regrouping. All that was left was the fate of being trampled upon. The panicked soldiers fled in all directions, and the entire battlefield was a mess. In the end, even the Imperial Guard Division had to leave the city to fight. The Ingbu army was in chaos, but the Qin army was not. The three cavalry units weaved through the battlefield in an orderly manner, cooperating with each other, and efficiently reaped the lives of the enemy. The true commander of the army was Chao Can, who was on the city wall. Chao Can used the command flag to command the three cavalry units to attack the Ingbu army. Seeing this, Ingbu knew that the situation was hopeless and did not want to be entangled with Wang Li. Ingbu shouted loudly, blocked Wang Li's attack, and led his troops to flee miserably to the rebel army's camp. Wang Li was still not satisfied and led his troops to chase after them. After chasing for more than 20 li, he led his troops back to Anyang City. In this battle, less than 10,000 of the 50,000 Ingbu army managed to escape, and the rest were buried under Anyang City. In this battle, there was no such thing as captives. If they did not live, they would die. At this point, Bai Qi's strategy was finally back on track. When the 100,000 Wang Li's troops escorted the rations plundered from Hanoi to Anyang City. At that time, Anyang City would be impregnable. At that time, the second step of Bai Qi's plan would be carried out. After 2 days of clamor, Anyang City finally regained its peace. Under Xiao He's command, the citizens of the city left the city to deal with the battlefield. They buried the corpses, collected the weapons, armor, horses, siege equipment, and rations, etc. Looking at the mountain of corpses and the sea of blood outside the city, the aristocratic families of Anyang looked at the Qin army with fear. Their originally restless thoughts were completely extinguished, and they did not dare to think about it anymore. After the battle ended, Ouyang Shuo returned to his room to meditate and did not see anyone. Everything in the city was left to Xiao He and Bai Hua. Outside Jiyuan City, after Ingbu left, Xiang Yu equipped his spear and prepared to fight generals. Xiang Yu was a martial arts genius, and he was proficient in saber, spear, sword, and halberd. The spear was the moon's seizing spear, the sword was the son of heaven's lightning sword, and the halberd was the heavenly dragon city breaker. Because it was a general fight, Xiang Yu chose the moon seizing spear. The news of the general contest had already spread throughout the army. Outside Thornplain City, there was a large empty space. Eli, Zhang Liao, Qin Xiong, and Wang Bei also dressed neatly and led their troops out of the city. The 5 generals came from different dynasties, spanning more than 1,600 years. Wu Lai belonged to the Shang dynasty, Wang Xi belonged to the Warring States period, Xiang Yu belonged to the Qin dynasty, Zhang Liao belonged to the Eastern Han dynasty and the Three Kingdoms, and Qin Xiong belonged to the Sui and Tang dynasties. This was a true battle that transcended time and space. On both sides of the drill ground, the soldiers of the 2 armies lined up in battle formations and cheered for their generals. In addition to shouting, the 2 sides also beat war drums at the same time to cheer. Fighting generals in the army was the most hot-blooded. Which man on the battlefield didn't want to kill the enemy under the gaze of millions of people? Even before the show began, the atmosphere in the venue was already burning. The shouts spread far and wide, echoing endlessly in the valley. Bai Qi stood atop the city wall with a calm expression on his face. Zhang Han and the other lords were seated by his side. After a while, Xiang Yu rode Black Horse into the drill ground. As soon as he appeared, there was a burst of cheers. After more than 10 days of fierce battle, Xiang Yu's prestige in the anti-Qin volunteer army was rising. Before this, the vassal army was only forced to obey Xiang Yu's command because of the situation. Now, they were willing. It couldn't be helped. The River East warriors led by Xiang Yu were too powerful. Killing generals, seizing flags, seizing cities, and seizing territory, none of them was a problem. Under Xiang Yu's leadership, this was an invincible iron army. At this moment, 3,000 River East warriors were lined up at the forefront of the volunteer army to support their commander. In the eyes of the River East warriors, Xiang Yu was their invincible god of war. On the opposite side, Eli was dissatisfied that Xiang Yu's appearance had attracted such cheers. Behind the 4 valiant generals were their elite troops. The ones who came to support Eli was the Mountain Barbarian Heavy Infantry Brigade. This iron wall was incomparably dazzling in every battle. Some people already called this army the Wall of Mountains and Seas. With their presence, the position would be as solid as a rock. Even the River East warriors would be defeated if they encountered the position guarded by the Mountain Barbarian Heavy Infantry Brigade. The Mountain Barbarian Heavy Infantry Brigade was the earliest infantry brigade in Shanghai City. Its individual combat strength was comparable to the Imperial Guard, and it could even contend with the Featherwood Guard. This was a true trump card force. Standing behind the 3 generals, Zhang Liao, Qin Xiong, and Wang Qi, were the trump card forces of Lingxi City, Xuanlong County, and Fallen Phoenix City. Unlike Shanghai City, the 3 generals were the top generals in their respective territories. Naturally, they were treated differently. Bai Hua and the others could not wait to invest the best resources in them. An earth-shattering battle was about to break out. To be continued. Chapter 425. With the deafening sound of war drums, the battle officially began. In front of the formation, Xiang Yu sat astride the dark demon horse and held the Overlord spear in his hand. He looked extremely domineering, as if he was looking down on everyone in the world. Amidst the cheers of the army, Xiang Yu was like a favored child of the heavens. The elegance of the god of war was on full display. Although it was 4 generals against 1 general, they couldn't all attack together. Otherwise, it would be too unsightly. The first person from the Qin army's camp to fight was the strongest general among all the generals, Eli. Eli was wearing a custom-made armor and holding a pair of iron halberds in his hands. The Rakshasa he was riding on was not any inferior to Xiang Yu's dark demon horse. As soon as he appeared, he was greeted with waves of cheers, and the loudest cheers were naturally from the mountain barbarians. The Rakshasa, this extraordinary mount, immediately became the focus of everyone present. What kind of beast is that? I don't know. One look, and I can tell he's not easy to deal with. The person is ugly, and so is the mount. Who are you? Tell me your name. Xiang Yu was even more excited when he saw that the newcomer was brave and courageous. Eli patted the Rakshasa and came to the front of the formation. He opened his mouth and said, "I am Eli. I will fight you. Evil is coming." Xiang Yu's eyes glinted. Although he was a fierce general, he was not a reckless man. Not only was he well-versed in military books, but he was also well-versed in history. Clearly, he knew of the name Evil. The legendary Wu Lai was also a warrior who could fight with rhinoceroses, bears, and tigers. Xiang Yu was naturally excited to meet such an opponent. Erlai was also born with great strength, and in terms of strength, he was on par with Xiang Yu. Xiang Yu was strong. Not only was he born with divine strength, but he was also highly skilled in martial arts. In terms of martial arts, he was far inferior to Xiang Yu. Eli did not show any weakness and took the initiative to attack. Rakshasa was very intelligent. She immediately activated Sprint and charged forward. He arrived in an instant. Xiang Yu smiled confidently and rode forward. As soon as the two of them came into contact, Xiang Yu casually thrust his spear forward, relying on the length of his weapon. Eli didn't dare to be careless. He raised his two halberds and raised them up to block. Clang! Indeed, Xiang Yu's seemingly casual attack was actually very powerful. If not for the fact that Eli had divine strength and the Rakshasa was a spiritual beast, they would not have been able to get away with this strike. If it was an ordinary general, he would have been immediately knocked off his horse. All right. When Xiang Yu saw that Wu Lai easily withstood the attack, he became even more excited. The Overlord spear in his hand struck down repeatedly, either sweeping or blocking. His expression was relaxed. Eli, on the other hand, became even more solemn. Xiang Yu's spear technique had already reverted to its original state, turning the complicated into the simple. His seemingly simple attacks were actually filled with intricate martial arts. If one was not careful, they would be at a great disadvantage. If he couldn't block it, or if he didn't neutralize the force in time, he would be heavily injured. Even with Wu Lai's terrifying physique, his chest still felt uncomfortable after being hit repeatedly. If he was hit by the Overlord spear, even if he didn't die, he would lose a layer of skin. What tyrant! He was indeed extraordinary. Just like that, the two of them fought for more than 30 rounds, and Eli gradually began to feel strained. The two were fighting generals, and Eli was basically defending passively. Even so, it was still strenuous for him. On the other hand, Xiang Yu did not even break a sweat. Xiang Yu's expression was relaxed from the beginning to the end. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that Xiang Yu had the upper hand. He had not even used his full strength, but he was already suppressing his opponent to the point where he couldn't even breathe. Seeing how fierce their general was, the anti-Qin army let out a heaven-shaking cheer. On the other hand, the Qin army was silent. Only the Mountain Barbarian Heavy Infantry Brigade was still cheering with all their might. Only now did Eli recognize Xiang Yu's bravery, and he was sincerely convinced. Zhang Liao, who was watching the battle not far away, patted his warhorse and said, "General Eli, I will help you." Zhang Liao's eyes were very sharp, and he knew that if this dragged on, there might be an accident. Zhang Liao's weapon was the Crescent Moon Halberd, a long weapon like the Overlord spear. Seeing this, Xiang Yu did not panic at all, laughing loudly. "You came at the right time. What a tyrant. 1 against 2, and he was still so relaxed." He patted down with his spear, forcing Eli back. With a backhand, he used his spear to deflect Zhang Liao's Crescent Moon Halberd. Each spear was like an antelope's horn, untraceable but fatal. To Xiang Yu, his spear technique was both offensive and defensive. Zhang Liao's halberd technique was also exquisite, and his attainment was not shallow. However, in terms of strength, there was a huge gap between Zhang Liao and Xiang Yu. Facing Xiangyu, he felt somewhat aggrieved. He had clearly hit the other party, but Xiangyu had easily parried it. It was like a child with great swordsmanship facing a giant. No matter how good the child's swordsmanship was, he could not keep up with the giant's palm, and the child would not be able to withstand it. At this time, Xiangyu's martial arts had reached perfection, and he was at his peak. Facing such a god of war, anyone would feel powerless. Good. Seeing Xiangyu's display of strength, the rebel army could not help but cheer. Fighting 1 against 2, he was not at a disadvantage. How fierce was that? One must know that the person fighting with Xiangyu was not a nobody. Be it Eli or Zhang Liao, they were peak existences in their era. Green leaves and red flowers, how breathtaking. The three fought for another 30 rounds, but still could not do anything to Xiangyu. At this time, Eli was already somewhat exhausted. On the other hand, Xiangyu only had a little sweat, which was terrifying. The Overlord was not only strong in martial arts and strength, but also in physical strength. It could be said that the Overlord had almost no weaknesses at this moment. Perhaps only Lu Bu, the god of war of the 3 kingdoms, could compete with such a fierce general. No one knew when the 2 gods of war would fight in the future. Just the thought of it made people's blood boil. The charm of the game was fully reflected in the battle of generals. Even the leaders of the 2 camps could not help but feel their blood boil. The generals who did not participate in the battle were eager to go up and fight. The atmosphere outside Jiyuan City was getting more and more heated than a battle. Xiangyu, don't be arrogant. I'm coming. The one who spoke was Wang Bei, and he joined the battle. So far, Xiangyu was fighting 1 against 3. Come on, what's there to be afraid of? On horseback, Xiangyu was still as elegant as before, as if he did not care about the fierce generals in the world. Only the Overlord was qualified to look down on the heroes in the world. The 3 fierce generals, Eli, Zhang Liao, and Wang Bei, formed the 3 talents formation and surrounded Xiangyu in the middle. Xiangyu was not afraid at all. The dark majestic horse was also extraordinary. In the narrow circle, it could move freely, constantly changing its position to cooperate with Xiangyu's attacks. The man and the horse were like a whole. The heavy Overlord spear was difficult for ordinary people to lift, let alone use it. But in Xiangyu's hands, it was as light as a feather. He could use it easily, like a wooden stick. The attacks from the 3 of them still put some pressure on Xiangyu. Wang Bei was not a nobody. When he was under Bai Qi's command, he was known for his bravery and was a fierce general who did not fear death. While he watched from the side, his blood was already boiling. He joined the battle and attacked Xiangyu fiercely without any care. If not for Zhang Liao's support, Wang Bei did not know how many times he would have been hit by Xiangyu. How could it be normal for 3 generals to attack and defend? Xiangyu's expression became much more solemn. These 3 fierce generals could not be found in the Qin dynasty. It was enough for Xiangyu to have such a battle. This battle had really satisfied the eyes of the soldiers who were watching the battle. Was there a battle of a higher level than this in the world? No. After another 40 rounds of battle, the 2 sides were still evenly matched. At this time, even Bai Qi had to admit that Xiangyu was not arrogant when he boasted before. He really did have the strength to do so, seeing that the 3 of them could not do anything to Xiangyu. The Revolutionary Army's camp was even more jubilant, their cheers thundering. The last general of the Qin army, Qin Xiong, could no longer sit still. He joined the battle. 4 generals against 1 general, a never-before-seen battle that finally took place outside of Jiyuan City. Qin Xiong's participation increased the pressure on Xiangyu. Qin Xiong was using a lance, a long weapon among long weapons. His spear technique had also reached perfection. Otherwise, Ouyang Shuo would not have asked Qin Xiong to be the spear technique instructor. Moreover, Qin Xiong was young, energetic, and full of drive. The 4 fierce generals attacked Xiangyu together. Xiangyu's eyes became more and more fiery. The battle had finally forced Xiangyu to use his full strength. The Overlord spear was swung so fast that only after images could be seen. One side was still blocking the 2 iron halberds, while the other side suddenly appeared in another direction and collided with Zhang Liao's crescent moon halberd. It was such a shocking scene. The Overlord spear weighed more than 100 kilograms, not a small bamboo pole. With Xiang Yu's display of power, the battle reached its climax. The soldiers on both sides let out deafening shouts to cheer for their generals. Shouts rose and fell incessantly. Affected by this, the blood of the 5 generals in the field boiled even more. The influence of the environment on the generals could not be ignored. Even Xiang Yu, the Overlord, was filled with excitement at this moment. He was indescribably carefree and satisfied. To him, this battle of generals was even more satisfying than commanding a magnificent army. It was rare for him to meet a suitable opponent. This feeling could not be understood by those who were not on the same path. Huh? Xiang Yu laughed heartily. The Overlord's spear became sharper and sharper. Stimulated by Xiang Yu, Eli and the other 3 generals also displayed their martial arts to the fullest. Affected by this battle, Qin Xiong even felt that his martial arts skills, which had stagnated for years, were showing signs of breaking through again. This was what happened when an expert met an expert. This battle was destined to go down in history. Even Bai Qi, who was sitting on the city wall, could not help but focus. He was the one who arranged this battle, but the process was not something he could control. Bai Qi's intention was to use the general battle to stall Xiang Yu. Obviously, he had achieved his goal, but the price was a little too high. After this battle, Xiang Yu was almost deified in the volunteer army. In the previous battle, the volunteer army had experienced the power of Eli and the other fierce generals. They did not expect General Xiang to be able to fight 1 against 4 and not be at a disadvantage. The entire area outside Jinyuan City was boiling. To be continued. Chapter 426. Thunderous cheers erupted outside Jiyuan City. Xiang Yu fought against 4 enemies alone for another 30 rounds. His bravery did not diminish at all. At this moment, Eli was on the verge of being unable to hold on any longer. He was on the verge of defeat. Bai Qi raised his head and looked at the sky. The blazing sun was high in the sky, and it was already noon. Sound the gongs to retreat. General? Zhang Han was taken aback. Retreating at this time was a little unromantic. Bai Qi fell silent. Seeing this, Zhang Han could only give the order to retreat. The moment the order was given, an uproar broke out outside the city. Both sides were dissatisfied. The outcome of this great battle had not been decided yet. So why did they have to retreat? There was nothing they could do about it. No matter how unwilling Zhang Liao and the other generals were, they could only retreat. Eli was the only one who heaved a sigh of relief. Eli was the first to enter the battlefield. He had fought more than 100 rounds with Xiang Yu. Eli felt as if his internal organs had been displaced. Xiang Yu did not give chase. In fact, he was also a little tired. It was hard to say who would emerge victorious if the battle continued. Seeing that the Qin army was retreating, the anti-Qin army became even more arrogant and clamored outside the city. Xiang Yu sat on his ebony horse, enjoying the cheers and worship. 10 minutes later, seeing that the Qin army was avoiding the battle, Xiang Yu lost interest and gave the order to retreat. Just like that, the great battle ended in a hurry, leaving behind many regrets. In the afternoon, after the battle, Xiang Yu was exhausted, so he took a good nap at noon. However, his sweet dreams did not last long. At around 3 in the afternoon, a messenger rushed out of the tent in a panic. "Who is it?" The messenger was stopped by a guard. "This is an emergency. I need to report it to the general." "No, the general is taking a nap. We can't disturb him." The battle in the morning had made Xiang Yu's image even more prominent. The guard was naturally proud of him. "It's urgent. We can't delay it." The messenger looked anxious. When the guard saw this, he was in a dilemma. Just as he was at a loss, Xiang Yu's voice came from inside the tent. "Who's making a ruckus outside the tent?" The guard's face paled. He replied shakily, "General, it's the messenger." "General, something bad has happened." The messenger shouted from outside the tent when he saw this. "Impudent!" Xiang Yu bellowed, clearly very displeased. "Forgive me, General. Please forgive me, General." Hearing this, the guards and messengers all knelt outside the tent with terrified expressions. Xiang Yu was a hot-tempered man. If he did not agree with him, he would not be able to avoid a whipping. There was silence in the tent. After a long time, Xiang Yu's voice was heard. "Enter." Hearing that, the messenger walked into the tent and knelt down again. Xiang Yu frowned and scolded. "Why are you so flustered?" General Ingbu lost." "What?" Xiang Yu was shocked. He slammed the table and stood up. "There's a report from the front lines. General Ingbu was ambushed outside Anyang City. His entire army was almost wiped out." Xiang Yu remained silent for a long time. There was a dead silence in the tent. The messenger did not even dare to breathe heavily for fear of disturbing Xiang Yu. "Let's go," Xiang Yu said tiredly. Even the battle in the morning did not make him this tired. Even the overlord had times when he was too weak. "Yes, sir." The messenger scurried out of the tent as if he had been pardoned. Xiang Yu knew what kind of chain reaction Ingbu's defeat would cause. An army of 50,000 had failed to take down Anyang City. Xiang Yu did not doubt Ingbu's ability to lead an army. The only explanation was that Anyang City was a bait set up by Qi all along. How brilliant! As their headquarters, Jiuan City had holed up and attracted all the attention of the volunteer army. However, they had secretly used the inconspicuous Anyang City to set a trap for the volunteer army. With Ingbu's army defeated, Xiang Yu naturally did not have any expectations for the 30,000 mutant army that had arrived earlier. In an instant, Anyang City had devoured 80,000 soldiers. It was terrifying. A huge sense of defeat rose in Xiang Yu's heart. If that was the case, then the battle in the morning was just a premeditated show? What a good plan. To think that Xiang Yu was so full of himself and did not even know that he had fallen into a trap. Xiang Yu's heart was filled with endless bitterness. "No, I will never admit defeat." Xiang Yu's eyes glinted as his fighting spirit soared. The news of Ingbu's army's defeat quietly spread throughout the army. Other than that, the news of Di Chen's army being wiped out also spread like wildfire. The consecutive defeats caused the volunteer army's camp to fall silent. The volunteer army, which was already at a disadvantage in terms of military strength, had lost 80,000 soldiers in an instant. Everyone felt that the future of the volunteer army was beginning to dim. Some of the smarter ones even sensed a hint of danger from the news of Anyang City being occupied. Food. This curse was finally tightly wrapped around the volunteer army's head. Unease shrouded the volunteer army's camp. The jubilation in the morning had completely turned into a joke. In the evening, the defeated Ingbu's army fled back to the camp. Seeing the tragic state of Ingbu's army with their own eyes, the volunteer army became even more uneasy. The entire camp was in an uproar. As for Di Chen's army, they did not have the face to return to the camp after their defeat. No one knew where they were hiding in the wilderness. Xian? There was no need to think about it anymore. The moment Ingbu returned, he rushed to Xiang Yu's tent to beg for forgiveness. Unfortunately, he could not even enter the main tent. Xiang Yu was so furious that he almost slashed Ingbu's sword. Helpless, Ingbu could only kneel outside the tent. That night, Xiang Yu summoned all the feudal vassals for a meeting. When the feudal vassals saw Ingbu kneeling outside the tent, none of them looked at him. Some were sympathetic, while others were gloating. Everyone knew how unfavorable the situation was for the volunteer army. Fan Zheng's grain transport team would arrive at Giant Deer in a few days. Once Anyang City was occupied, the volunteer army's grain transport route would be cut off. Such a situation was truly despairing. Inside the main tent, Xiang Yu's expression was gloomy. He looked around and said through gritted teeth, "Attack Anyang City at all costs." "Yes, sir." All the feudal vassals knew that they were in a hopeless situation. They could only fight to the death. Unfortunately, Bai Qi would not give the volunteer army that chance. The next day, before Xiang Yu could make his move, the Qin army in Jiuan City had already turned out in full force. The army got into formation outside the city, eyeing the volunteer army covetously. The Qin army's goal was obvious. They wanted to delay the volunteer army. If the volunteer army dared to attack Anyang City, they would have to face the pursuit of millions of soldiers. After all, Anyang City was guarded by more than 100,000 soldiers. To take down Anyang, they would have to send at least 2 to 3 times that number, or 2 to 300,000 soldiers. The volunteer army did not have an advantage in terms of military strength. If they were to send 200,000 soldiers, how could they withstand the Qin army's attack? Just the thought of it was despairing. For a moment, the volunteer army was in a dilemma. The feudal vassals came up with emergency measures to deal with the situation. At this point, Xiang Yu could no longer make a decision. Sending Ingbu's army to attack Anyang City was his decision. Xiang Yu had obviously made a mistake in this matter. He had underestimated the Qin army, which led to their defeat. Ingbu knelt outside Xiang Yu's tent for an entire night, but he did not get to see Xiang Yu. Everyone knew that Xiang Yu was the real culprit, but no one dared to say it out loud. Poor Ingbu had become a scapegoat. Hesitation arose in the volunteer army. Time waited for no man. Just as the volunteer army was wavering, Wang Li's main force of 100,000 soldiers arrived at Anyang City. At the same time, the Imperial Guard Corps followed by Qi's plan and left Anyang City quietly. They advanced eastward, targeting the grain transport team led by Fan Zeng. The news Fan Zeng received was that the Qin army was trapped in Jiyuan City. He did not expect to be intercepted by the Qin army along the way. Facing the Imperial Guard Corps, the grain transport team could only surrender obediently. The grain that the Chu army had painstakingly gathered ended up in the hands of the Qin army and was transported to Anyang City. Even Xiang Yu's strategist, Fan Zeng, was captured by the Imperial Guard Corps. Ouyang Shua did not think highly of Fan Zeng. Compared to Zhang Liang, Fan Zeng, as Xiang Yu's #1 strategist, was overshadowed. Not only was Fan Zeng's political foresight a far cry from Zhang Liang, but he was also inferior in the art of persuading a monarch. Some people said that it was Xiang Yu's obstinacy that prevented Fan Zeng's plan from being implemented. But in reality, as a top strategist, if he could not use a suitable method to persuade the monarch to accept his plan according to his character, it was a failure in itself. Fan Zeng liked to take advantage of his seniority and was curious about the plan, but he did not consider Xiang Yu's character. When the two of them collided, it naturally aroused Xiang Yu's disgust. Therefore, it was true that Fan Zeng was intelligent, but he was not a qualified strategist. A truly qualified strategist would not suggest the appointment of a king of Chu, which would impede Xiang Yu and make him bear the crime of regicide. A truly qualified strategist would not allow Han Xian to be put in an important position in Xiang Yu's camp. A truly qualified strategist would not beat around the bush at the banquet at Hongmen. He would have killed Liu Bang directly and made it a fait accompli. What would Xiang Yu do then? A truly qualified counselor would have noticed Liu Bang's plan and warned his master, Xiang Yu, when Liu Bang was secretly plotting against him. A truly qualified strategist would not have been detested by Xiang Yu after being crowned with the title of second father. Ouyang Shua looked uncertain as he looked at the old man in the hall. Bai Hua said, "Wu Yi, do you want to recruit this man?" Fan Zeng was captured by the Imperial Guards, so he was naturally in Ouyang Shua's hands. Ouyang Shua shook his head. "Why? You don't want him? Just don't give him to me." Bai Hua took advantage of the situation when he heard this. In your dreams, Fan Zeng was not a cabbage, so Ouyang Shua naturally would not let him go so easily. Then what do you think? Bai Hua was speechless. Fan Zeng was ashamed and resentful. He did not expect that he would be so disliked. This man is very useful. Don't forget that Xiang Yu has a divine general under him. Think about it. If we exchange Fan Zeng for that divine general, will Xiang Yu agree? When Bai Hua heard this, he gave Ouyang Shua a dirty look. "Wu Yi, you're too bad." To be continued. Chapter 427. Guard, here, send a letter to Xiang Yu. Tell him that his second father is in our hands. Ask him to exchange for Han Xian. Otherwise, Fan Zeng will die in Anyang. Yes, sir. Exchanging Fanzeng for Han Xian was not a bad deal. After Fanzeng was taken away, Ouyang Shuo held a discussion with the others before dismissing the meeting. Anyang was now rich in resources and a strong military force. Ouyang Shuo was confident that even if Xiang Yu personally led an attack, Anyang could hold out for a few days. The army guarding Anyang consisted of 140,000 soldiers from Wang Li's army, 10,000 from the Imperial Guard, and 2,400 from the Featherwood Guards, a total of 160,000 soldiers. The 500 elites brought by Bai Hua and Feng Xiuhuang were basically wiped out. Ouyang Shuo simply removed them from the fighting force and focused on protecting the two women. The two generals, Chao Can and Zhou Bo, could only serve as guard for the time being. Similarly, Xia Hoing stayed by Ouyang Shuo's side as a personal guard. This was the good thing about the game. As long as a general recognized a master, they would not betray him. Naturally, Ouyang Shuo did not have to worry that Xia Hoing would kill him while he was asleep to avenge his former master. The core of the army was still Xiao He. Taking advantage of his free time, Ouyang Shuo sought out Xiao He several times to discuss the territory. Yes, territory. Ouyang Shuo no longer had much suspense about the Battle of Giant Deer. His mind was already focused on the changes and arrangements of the main map after the battle. The current Xiao He was far from being as powerful as the three heroes of Han in history. However, Ouyang Shuo was not worried at all. As soon as they returned to the main map, Gaia would naturally revise the subdued historical figures so that they would be at their peak level. In the main camp of the Revolutionary Army, Xiang Yu was shocked and angry when he received the letter. As expected, everything was as he had predicted. While the feudal lords were still arguing, Bai Qi's butcher's knife had already fallen. It was too late. Xiang Yu was dejected. Xiang Yu did not object to exchanging Han Xian for Fanzeng. No matter what, Fanzeng was his second father. He had to save him. Most importantly, the Revolutionary Army was in a desperate situation after their rations were robbed. Their plans for hegemony came to nothing. Guards, here, bring Han Xian to me. Yes, sir. The guard recognized Han Xian. After all, Han Xian had come to Xiang Yu's tent several times to speak to him, but he had always been rejected. After a while, Han Xian was tied up and brought into the tent. Upon closer inspection, Han Xian's expression was unusually calm. Han Xian had naturally heard about what had happened in the army over the past 2 days, and he seemed to have already predicted today's outcome. Xiang Yu looked up at Han Xian with a complicated expression. For a long time, Xiang Yu did not speak, as if he wanted to say something. Seeing this, Han Xian smiled. General, there's only one way to turn the tables, and that is to create the illusion of peace talks during the exchange of captives. In fact, it is a desperate battle. You will attack Anyang City with all the strength of the army. With Han Xian's intelligence, he had long noticed Xiang Yu's indescribable feelings. Han Xian's judgment had been verified several times, so Xiang Yu naturally wanted to hear Han Xian's opinion. Unfortunately, he had rejected Han Xian's suggestions several times and even mocked Han Xian. Based on Xiang Yu's character, how could he open his mouth? Xiang Yu's expression became even more complicated when he heard that. After a while, he shook his head and said, "That's second father. I can't disregard his life." Alas, Han Xian let out a long sigh and did not speak. What a woman's benevolence. The next day, Han Xian was tied up and sent to Anyang City. Ouyang Shuo kept his promise and immediately let Fanzeng go. Untie General Han. Yes. Although Han Xian was captured, his expression was unusually calm. General, please sit down. Hearing this, Han Xian calmly sat down below. General, I have admired your name for a long time. Please forgive me if I have neglected you. Ouyang Shuo was very polite to Han Xian. Han Xian did not express an opinion. Ouyang Shuo's expression changed when he saw this. Did Di Chun send an invitation to you? Yes. Why didn't you agree? Ouyang Shuo looked nervous. He was really afraid that Han Xian would say something extraordinary. There is no other reason. The timing is not right. If Di Chun could take Anyang City, I would have agreed. Unfortunately, he didn't. Ouyang Shuo was speechless. That was close. Dichen almost succeeded. He could not imagine what kind of waves Dichen would cause in the north if he had two generals, Lin Pe and Han Xian. Fortunately, Bai Qi was more skillful. What do you think about the Lord of Martial Peace's plan? Ouyang Shuo changed the topic. Han Xian said lightly, "Not bad. That's simple? That's simple." Ouyang Shuo's mouth twitched. Han Xian was not convinced. If Han Xian was in charge of the Revolutionary Army, the situation would be unpredictable. "General, are you willing to take up a post in Shanghai City?" Ouyang Shuo asked carefully. He was really worried that Han Xian would refuse. Compared to Dichun, Ouyang Shuo was more attractive to historical talents. The characteristics of Shanghai City was also not something that Handan City could compare to. Ouyang Shuo still did not have full confidence. "Yes." Cough. Ouyang Shuo choked. "Please, you are a divine general. Shouldn't you be more reserved? You don't understand?" "A little." Ouyang Shuo admitted honestly that he did not expect Han Xian to agree so readily. "I know a little about the art of judging people. The Marquis has the Emperor's qi. He is a rare wise ruler. I have been looking for a wise ruler everywhere. Now that I have met him, what reason do I have to refuse?" Ouyang Shuo heard this and suddenly understood. Had the Emperor's qi already taken root in his body? If Han Xian did not say it, Ouyang Shuo would not have believed it. He only knew that the golden Qilin seal had become more and more unpredictable after he extracted the dragon soul from Liu Bang. When Ouyang Shuo practiced the inner canon of the Yellow Emperor, he could vaguely feel that he had established a mysterious connection with the seal. Other than that, Wang Feng and the other generals were even more in awe of Ouyang Shuo. It seemed that all this was the effect of the Emperor's qi. Ouyang Shuo's luck and characteristics were undergoing some mysterious transformation. This transformation, because it affected the spiritual level, would also have an interactive effect on reality. It was just that he did not know what kind of state it would eventually become. The difference between Ouyang Shuo and Dichun was vividly demonstrated. One tried his best, but could not get what he wanted, while the other made a divine general submit with just a few words. Could it be that this was the legendary aura of a king? Ouyang Shuo thought maliciously. Ouyang Shuo was naturally very happy to be able to subdue Han Xian. In this battle, he had Wen Shaohe in literature and Han Xian in martial arts. Of the three heroes of the early Han dynasty, Ouyang Shuo had one too. What was there to be dissatisfied with? "General," Ouyang Shuo bowed to Han Xian as a form of greeting. Han Xian turned sideways and then solemnly bowed. "Greetings, Marquis." At this point, the relationship between the ruler and the subject had been settled. Ouyang Shuo had won another divine general. Ouyang Shuo checked Han Xian's attributes. Name, Han Xian, divine level, title, soldier immortal, unparalleled state scholar, dynasty, Qin Han identity, general of Shanghai City, occupation, special general loyalty, 70 commander, 99 force, 70 intelligence, 85 politics, 45 specialty, military strategy, increases troop morale by 40, movement speed by 30, defense by 20, lethality by 25, ancient book, 3 chapters on the art of war by Han Xian equipment, ancestral sword evaluation, the best in martial arts, the best in strategy, overcome danger, destroy hardness, and be brittle. Zhao plotted against Han Bin and set up Wei Biao. Since the capital was tightened, he led the army to the north. He helped Wei climb the mountain to destroy Zhao. His might was as bright as fire, and his momentum surpassed the wind. His generation was like a remnant, and his level was like grass. 2 prefectures were purged, and the 4 states were raised. He cared for northern Yin and represented the East Sea, subdued the dragon, and took its journey. Han Xian's commander-in-chief was a little higher than Bai Qi's, close to the war Saint Sun Wu's. Bai Qi was both a commander-in-chief and a fierce general. Han Xian was a more purely a commander-in-chief. The more soldiers Han Xian had, the better. This showed Han Xian's ability to command troops. How could the title of Soldier Immortal be easy? In addition, Han Xian was also a military theorist, representative of military strategists. He had organized military books with Zhang Liang and had written 3 chapters on the art of war in Han Xian. Compared to Bai Qi, Han Xian's personality was slightly flawed. For Ouyang Shua, he was naturally tolerant. The generals in his army might not all be great and honorable people. After learning that Ouyang Shua had subdued Han Xian, the 2 women were both envious and jealous. Why do you always get to see good things? Feng Xiuhuang was unhappy. There's nothing I can do about it. Looks determined fate. Ouyang Shua was in a good mood, and he joked. Tisk, he's clearly not handsome. That's right, he's not tall either. How could the 2 women tolerate Ouyang Shua's smugness? They continue to mock him. Jealousy. You're just jealous. Facing a certain person's shamelessness, the 2 women were also speechless. The Battle of Giant Deer was about to end. The looting of the supply team signaled the end of the volunteer army. The 600,000 volunteer army was blocked by the 1 million Qin soldiers, unable to advance or retreat. The army was short of food, and it looked like they would run out of food soon. The ones who could not sit still were not the feudal lords, but the players of the anti-Qin faction. The feudal lords, who should be harvesting contribution points, had already reaped great rewards from the earlier battles. They did not want to be buried with the volunteer army. In order to reduce their losses, the feudal lords thought of a solution, which was suicide. Once a feudal lord committed suicide, the army he brought could be safely teleported back to their territory. In just a few days, the feudal lords, who were suffering from a lack of food, committed suicide one after another. In a short period of time, the numbers of the volunteer army decreased sharply. Under this chain reaction, in just 4 or 5 days, other than a few ambitious feudal lords, the rest of the feudal lords had already retreated from the battlefield. Once the inhuman army retreated, the volunteer army's defeat was irreversible. The afterglow of the setting sun shone on the valley, making it look exceptionally bleak. To be continued. Chapter 428. Only 300,000 soldiers were left on the vast battlefield. The vassals gathered in Xiang Yu's tent once again. General Xiang, what should we do now? Xiang Yu sat at the head of the table in silence. Fan Zeng sat at the side with a frown. Fan Zeng was extremely sensitive after being captured. Fan Zeng could sense that the other vassals were looking at him strangely, or perhaps mockingly. In fact, the vassals were not in the mood to do so. After a long while, one of the vassals said carefully, "Why don't we surrender?" The air in the tent froze, as if it had touched a taboo. Bastard! The silent Xiang Yu suddenly flew into a rage. He slammed his palm on the table, sending wine flying everywhere. Even if we die in battle, we can't surrender to the Qin traitors. Xiang Yu's voice was powerful and domineering. The vassals shuddered. Recalling Xiang Yu's dominance on the battlefield, the cowardly ones turned pale. I'll be the first to kill anyone who dares to surrender. Xiang Yu looked around, his eyes filled with murderous intent. His words were dripping with blood. Absolute silence. Not a single sound could be heard. The overlord's wrath would bleed for 5 steps. Even so, the vassals did not give up on their plans. The vassals were not fools, nor were they as hot-blooded as Xiang Yu. When the uprising started, their original intention was to overthrow the tyranny of the Qin dynasty. By the time they gained power, their original intention had changed to personal power. Seeing that there was no hope of victory, how many of them would mourn? Blood was warm, but the hearts of men were cold. The vassals appeared to submit to Xiang Yu's tyranny, but they had already made up their minds. Rather than waiting for death, they might as well drag out an ignoble existence. In the end, the meeting ended on a sour note. The vassals could not reach a consensus with Xiang Yu. After the vassals left, Xiang Yu smashed his wine cup in anger. A bunch of bastards. Fan Zeng sat at the side and said gloomily, "General, did you see that?" Xiang Yu did not speak, his face darkening. Their eyes are already showing signs of retreat. Without the Qin army's oppression, these spineless people will surrender." Fan Zhang's tone was indescribably gloomy. Xiang Yu still did not speak, but he looked at Fan Zhang with a cold gaze. The atmosphere in the tent was unusually awkward. Fan Zhang flew into a rage out of humiliation when he saw this, and he flicked his sleeve and left. Several days later, the armies of the various vassal states could no longer hold on and surrendered. The provisions in the camp could not even last a day. If they didn't surrender, they would starve to death. Even if they didn't starve to death, how could a group of soldiers who couldn't even fill their stomachs be able to resist the attack of the Qin army? Since that was the case, he might as well just surrender. With just tens of thousands of Chu soldiers, they could not suppress the army of more than 200,000. Xiang Yu's threat was just empty words. In front of an army, a single person's bravery was insignificant. No matter how much hatred Xiang Yu had, he could not lead the Chu army to attack the armies of the feudal vassals. If that was the case, it would only cause pain to those close to him and delight his enemies. The Qin dynasty's mutant army was dissatisfied with the vassal army surrender. They were still hoping to earn some contribution points through this final battle. According to the war settings, once an NPC army surrendered, the Inhuman army couldn't kill them. The surrendered soldiers were all handed over to Zhang Han's army to be detained. The lords could only stomp their feet and curse the feudal vassals for being spineless as they sighed helplessly. Gaia was extremely shrewd. Once the balance between the two sides was broken, there would be no room for the players to take advantage of the situation. It was the same in the previous battle of Chongping. The battle ended the moment the Zhao army surrendered, not giving the mutant army a chance to kill the captives. Even the Chu army could not hold on after the armies of the feudal vassals surrendered. Most of this Chu army had been taken from Song Yi by Xiang Yu. They were not his trusted troops. Thus, at this juncture, the Chu army did not necessarily have to listen to Xiang Yu's commands. Xiang Yu's true trusted troops were only 3,000 Jiangdong warriors. After a series of battles, there were only 2,000 left. What was even more unacceptable to Xiang Yu was that as the mutant army retreated, the generals under his command also left him one by one, following their new master to the main plain to further their development. Ingbu, Longqi, Jibu, and Zhong Limei were all killed. Following the retreat of the four generals, the last of the Inhuman Legion also left. The entire volunteer army was left with only the 2,000 Jiangdong warriors led by Xiang Yu. Everyone was deserted. In the end, even Fan Zheng left Xiang Yu. In order to save Fan Zheng, Xiang Yu gave up on Han Xian's plan, which was equivalent to giving up on his last chance of survival. Ironically, Fan Zheng left him in the end. The human heart was complicated and hard to fathom. Besieged on all sides. Truly besieged on all sides. It was indeed ironic that the famous besieged on all sides would play out in advance in this nameless canyon. Overlord Xiang Yu was officially at the end of his road. This was the last battle. Xiang Yu would never surrender. There were only overlords who died in battle, not those who surrendered. After receiving the news, Ouyang Shuo led his troops to the main battlefield to witness this last battle. The majestic Qin army marched out of the city and formed a formation outside the city. To show respect, the Qin army sent out their strongest formation. In terms of generals, it was still led by Yi Lai, Zhang Liao, Qin Xiong, and Wang Bei. In terms of soldiers, the Qin army also sent out their strongest formation, the Featherwood Guards and the Mountain Barbarian Heavy Infantry Brigade. Only the Featherwood Guards, with their military soul, dared to face the Jiangdong warriors head-on. The armies of the other lords did not dare to enter the field to face such a group of fierce beasts. Even so, Ouyang Shuo still sent the Mountain Barbarian Heavy Infantry Brigade to cooperate. The combination of shield and spear could often produce an effect that was greater than two. This was the pinnacle of the battle. There was no warm-up, no cheering. Both sides fought with all their strength from the start, leaving no room for maneuver. Silence. The whole valley fell into silence. Only the sound of weapons clashing echoed in the canyon. The millions of spectators were completely silent as they watched this unparalleled battle in silence. There was no cheering, no cheering. Gazing at him was the best form of praise. This battle caused the mountains and rivers to change color, and the sun and moon to lose their luster. The sun was setting in the west and setting in the west. Xiangyu rode on the black stallion, looking around with a blank look in his eyes. The war horses neighed, and blood flowed like a river. 2,000 Jiangdong warriors could no longer stand up. The invincible Jiangdong warriors were finally defeated in front of the Featherwood Guards. With the cooperation of the mountain barbarian warriors, the Featherwood Guards used tang knives to defend the glory of Shanghai City. In this battle, the Featherwood Guards lost more than 1,000 men, suffering heavy losses. Even so, the lords of the Qin dynasty's camp looked at the Featherwood Guards with awe. What kind of army was this? The lords had experienced the bravery of the Jiangdong warriors. It was such a group of monsters that fell under the saber of the Featherwood Guards. It was really chilling. A system notification suddenly sounded in Ouyang Shua's ears. System notification. Congratulations to player, not saying you have no clothes. The Featherwood Guards have condensed the military soul after a series of bloody battles. They beheaded the Jiangdong warriors and completed the tempering. Their blood qi is monstrous, and they are officially promoted to divine martial guards. The surviving 1,400 Featherwood Guards exuded a frightening aura. Their murderous aura was monstrous, and their blood qi lingered. Behind each Featherwood Guard, a red light flashed, and a scarlet cloak appeared. Upon closer inspection, it was actually made with reference to Ouyang Shua's cloak. Both sides of the cloak were embroidered with golden fish dragons, looking extremely domineering. Name: Divine Martial Cloak, Dark Gold. Attributes: increases morale by 40, combat power by 45, movement speed by 25. Characteristics: Divine Martial. After activation, reincarnate once without loss. Can only be activated once. Evaluation: Divine Martial Guard's exclusive cloak. Limited to 3,000. Symbol of the Divine Martial Guard. Exclusive equipment. Cannot be dropped, traded, or unequipped. Follows you in life and death. Domineering. The Featherwood Guard was officially renamed to the Divine Martial Guard by Gaia. Limited to 3,000. Every new member would automatically receive a Divine Martial Cloak. After equipping the Divine Martial Cloak, the Divine Martial Guard's combat power would increase by almost half. If they were to fight the Jiangdong warriors again, even without the cooperation of the Mountain Barbarian Infantry, the Divine Martial Guard would still be able to take them down. The change of the Divine Martial Guard shocked and envied the lords present. Even a fool knew that the Featherwood Guard had obtained great benefits. From today onwards, the Divine Martial Guard would become the symbol of Ouyang Sha. In this vast world, there was only one army. The Divine Martial Guard was not the main character of the battlefield. The focus of the audience was gathered on Xiangyu. Some of the lords were already somewhat restless, wanting to forcefully take the honor of killing Xiangyu. The reason why they did not make a move was firstly because they were worried about Xiangyu's sudden counterattack, and secondly, because of the Mountain Sea Alliance. Everyone knew that the Mountain Sea Alliance, or rather, Shanghai City, was the greatest contributor to killing Xiangyu. After 4 battles, Ouyang Shua's prestige among the lords increased day by day. At least for now, no lord dared to touch the tiger's whiskers of Shanghai City. Ouyang Shua rode his horse and came before Xiangyu. Who are you? Tell me your name. I don't kill nameless people. Although Xiangyu was in dire straits, his domineering aura did not diminish. He noticed that even by Qi, Eli, and the other generals were abnormally respectful to this young man. Ouyang Shua smiled and said, "How can a man without clothes?" "Greetings, General Xiang." Unexpectedly, Ouyang Shua's words did not contain any hint of gunpowder. Xiangyu did not fall for it. He said, "You want me to surrender?" "Impossible." Ouyang Shua glanced at Xiangyu, shook his head, and said indifferently, "Kill yourself." As soon as he said that, the group of lords was in an uproar. They could not understand why Ouyang Shua would give up the reward that was within his grasp. Little did they know that heroes cherished heroes. Ouyang Shuo did not want to see the overlord of a generation die in the hands of thieves. Fine, let the overlord of Western Chu return to his original path. Xiang Yu heard this and did not say anything. After a long time, he said, "How can a man without clothes? I will remember you. I owe you a favor." After saying that, Xiang Yu did not have any reluctance to leave and calmly drew his sword to commit suicide. The overlord of a generation, Xiang Yu, had finally died by his own sword. The beautiful sunset was like blood. To be continued. Chapter 429. With Xiang Yu's suicide, the battle officially came to an end. Campaign announcement. The Battle of Giant Deer has officially ended. Congratulations to the Qin Dynasty faction for successfully reversing the course of history. Each Qin Dynasty faction lord will be rewarded with 1,000 achievement points. The total amount of Qin Dynasty faction lord contribution points will be increased by 50 points. Friendly reminder. Additional contribution points are not included in the contribution ranking. When Bai Qi obtained the command of the Qin Dynasty's camp, the system rewarded Ouyang Shuo with an additional 20 battle contribution points. With the two added together, Ouyang Shuo would obtain an additional 70 contribution points, which was close to double. Battle campaign announcement. The Battle of Giant Deer has officially ended. Additional contribution points will be calculated based on the player's contribution to the battle campaign and their contribution to the faction. The sound of the system's notification immediately resounded in Ouyang Shuo's ears. System notification. Player who says he has no clothes. The representative of the Qin Dynasty factions in humans. You have occupied Anyang City, defeated the Yingbu army, and resisted the River East warriors. You have made great contributions and will be rewarded with an additional 50,000 contribution points. In the end, Ouyang Shuo once again obtained the evaluation of great merit. This time, it was a freak accident. Ouyang Shuo's original plan was to fight in the wilderness. Unexpectedly, after returning from the wilderness, he ended up falling into Bai Qi's plan. He even played a crucial role in it. Thinking about it, if not for the 3,000 Featherwood Guards' defense, Anyang City would have long since fallen into the anti-Qin camp. The entire battle situation could be reversed. Compared to Ouyang Shuo, Dichun only lacked a little bit of luck. Dichun had almost become the key to the Battle of Giant Deer. Even so, Ouyang Shuo's reward was only average and couldn't be compared to Mu Ye's reward. The Battle of Mu Yi was about to become a masterpiece. When Bai Qi obtained the authority to command the Qin Dynasty's camp, he was awarded 50,000 contribution points. Therefore, in Ouyang Shuo's evaluation, this effect was not included in the category of additional contribution points. With just these two rewards, Ouyang Shuo had obtained 100,000 contribution points. After calculating all the players' additional contribution points, the final contribution ranking was officially established. Rank, name, contribution points. First place, how do I say I have no clothes? 684,000 points. Second place, Wolf Warrior, 235,000 points. Third place, Feng Qiuhuang, 228,000 points. Fourth place, White Birch, 225,000 points. Fifth place, Emperor Chun, 154,000 points. Sixth place, Dominating Heroes, 85,000 points. Seventh place, Lord Chun Shin, 84,500 points. 8th place. Dragon Point Seeking, 75,200 points. 9th place. South of Rosy Clouds, 72,500 points. 10th place. Siege Lion, 72,000 points. It was not difficult to find out the importance of military strength in a battle by looking at the rankings. Warwolf, White Birch, Feng Qiuhuang, and Di Chun, for third-rank marquises, led 10,000 soldiers, which was 3 times the number of first-rank counts. The contribution points that the 4 of them obtained were far ahead of the other lords. As for Ouyang Shuo, there was no need to even mention him. Not only did he have the highest noble rank, but his army was also the most elite. He also received the most additional rewards. earning more than 680,000 contribution points in one go. Xiongba, Lord Chun Shun, Seeking Dragon Acupuncture Point, and Siege Lion in the second echelon had obtained about the same amount of contribution points. Xiongba and Lord Chun Shun were able to suppress the Seeking Dragon pressure points and the Sieging Lion. From this, it could be seen that the great powers were indeed great powers. They had deep foundations and were well prepared. Under Xiongba was Wu Qi, under Lord Chun Shun was Tian Dan, both first-class generals. Compared to Dragon Searching County and Black Lion County, the troops that the two had brought were much more elite. As time went on, the Seeking Dragon Acupuncture Point and the others were unable to keep up with Ouyang Shua's pace. Within the alliance, Feng Qiuhuang also surpassed White Birch for the first time, rising to third place. Although the Alliance of Mountains and Sea still occupied half of the rankings, it was already filled with hidden worries. In the previous battles, the Seeking Dragon Acupuncture Point and the others were able to call the wind and summon the rain. It was all because the scale of the battles was small, and Ouyang Shua alone was enough to control the situation. Under Ouyang Shua's guidance, the members of the Alliance of Mountains and Sea were like fish in water. It was also because of the advantages accumulated in the previous 3 battles that the Seeking Dragon Acupuncture Point and the Sieging Lion had the capital to resist Xiongba and the others. Otherwise, they would have fallen behind long ago. In his previous life, the dragon-searching city was not as glorious. As the scale of the battles increased, the influence that Ouyang Shua could exert was already very limited. The Battle of Chongping was already showing signs of this. The Battle of Giant Deer was even more so. Facing an army of over 1 million mutants, how could Ouyang Shua alone change the situation? In this battle, the Seeking Dragon Acupuncture Point and the others could only rely on themselves. Apart from that, the factor of generals could not be ignored. In the previous 3 battles, the Seeking Dragon Acupuncture Point and the others were fortunate enough to obtain satisfactory generals in the early stages of the game. Xiongba and the others were limited by the rules and did not have suitable generals. But now it was different. The number of generals that the major factions had already surpassed the Seeking Dragon Acupuncture Point and the others. This was the foundation. Next, if the Seeking Dragon Acupuncture Point and the others did not do anything big, they would be suppressed by Xiongba and the others. The elimination of the Yellow Turban Alliance and Tao Wu's elimination was a dangerous signal. After the battle, the top 10 territories would definitely be promoted to a rank 1 county city. The promotion mission was another big hurdle. In this aspect, Xiongba and the others once again suppressed the Seeking Dragon Acupuncture Point and the others. The Yanhuang Alliance's foundation was slowly being revealed. It would be very difficult for the Alliance of Mountains and Sea to completely suppress the Yanhuang Alliance. To Di Chun and the others, Ouyang Shua was the only mountain that was pressing down on them. Of course, it was not that Ouyang Shua did not have a plan. He would do his best to support Bai Hua, then pull Feng Qiuhuang in, forming the strongest iron triangle in history. This was the backbone of the Yanhuang Alliance. The battle between the Alliance of Mountains and Sea and the Yanhuang Alliance was far from over. On the rankings, the biggest change was, of course, the dark horse south of Rosy Clouds. A leader that did not belong to one of the 2 alliances had entered the top 10 rankings. The commotion caused by this was much more explosive than Ouyang Shua's victory. Just like that, the Yanhuang Alliance and the Alliance of Mountains and Sea had monopolized the rankings. What made the Siege Lion even more humiliated was that south of Rosy Clouds had actually used a 500-point advantage to firmly suppress him. It was truly amazing. Ouyang Shua was not completely clueless about this dark horse. The Black Snake Guard was formed to monitor the various territories. South of Rosy Clouds territory was called the Rosy Clouds County. It was located in the South Hunan Province and bordered the South Sichuan Province and South Ridge Province, where Shanghai City was located. The South Hunan Province did not have any members of the 2 alliances stationed there. South of Rosy Clouds was the local tyrant of the South Hunan Province and was also the leader of the Rosy Cloud Alliance. Before this, the rise of the local tyrants was only faintly discernible. The emergence of south of rosy clouds was undoubtedly a sign that the local tyrants had appeared. There were too many lords in the China region who were unwilling to submit to the two alliances and wanted to start their own businesses. Ouyang Shuo remembered that in the 5 years of his previous life, the Rosy Cloud Alliance had always been in the South Hunan province. In his previous life, south of Rosy Clouds was an existence that could stand on equal footing with giants like White Birch. The wheel of history was truly irresistible. Even Ouyang Shuo's rebirth could not stop the rise of the local tyrants. The future of the southern border would not be peaceful. Ouyang Shuo, as the protector general of the southern border, would not only face the challenge of the Yanhuang alliance. The commotion caused by the contribution rankings would continue to ferment. At this moment, what the lords were most concerned about wasn't the contribution rankings. The lords who had gained a lot were naturally calculating how many contribution points they needed to become a rank 3 marquis. The other lords had their eyes on the contribution rankings. Such an opportunity would vanish in a flash. Ouyang Shuo was also looking at his contribution points. As for the contribution rankings, he was no longer interested. His basic contribution points were 684,000 contribution points. After the 70% bonus, it would be 1162,800 contribution points. After deducting the 140,000 contribution points spent in the contribution rankings, he was left with 1022,800 contribution points. It should be noted that the contribution points spent in the contribution rankings would be added to the contribution rankings. Moreover, they would also receive additional bonuses. Otherwise, no lord would exchange for them during the contribution rankings. More than 1 million contribution points was enough to make the other lords go crazy. Ouyang Shuo did not hesitate and converted them all into contribution points at a 10:1 ratio. In total, he had 102,280 contribution points. In addition, when he killed Su Huang, Ouyang Shuo also obtained 2,000 contribution points. Finally, there was the bonus of 4,000 contribution points for being the first on the contribution rankings. There was also the bonus of 1,000 contribution points for turning defeat into victory for the Qin dynasty's camp. In just the Battle of Giant Deer, Ouyang Shuo had obtained 109,280 contribution points. It was truly terrifying. Ouyang Shuo checked and found that his total contribution points had reached 262,180 contribution points. He had been promoted to a rank 1 marquis. The next rank was the Duke rank. A Duke's contribution points were 1 million, which was extremely terrifying. Ouyang Shuo was happy for a while, but he quickly calmed himself down. He was only a quarter of the 1 million contribution points he needed to be promoted to Duke. He still had a long way to go. In addition to Ouyang Shuo, Baiwa and Feng Xiaohuang had also been promoted to rank 2 marquis. Because Di Chun and Battle Wolf had been promoted to rank 2 marquis not long ago, and because they belonged to the anti-Qin faction, they didn't have any additional contribution points. Lord Chunshin, Xiongba, Dragon-seeking Acupoint Point, south of Rosy Clouds, and Siege Lion had all been promoted to rank 3 marquis. In addition, it was unknown which lords had been promoted to rank 3 marquis. In the alliance of mountains and seas, by an in-song, when we're only a step away from being promoted to rank 3 marquis. Once they returned to the main map, it wouldn't be a problem if they worked hard. To be continued. Chapter 430. After the contribution points were tallied up, the merchant shop was also emptied. With this, the war finally came to an end. The lords were teleported back to the main map. Only Ouyang Shuo was left behind. The members of the Mountain Sea Alliance were already used to this. They bade farewell and left. While waiting for the final reward, Ouyang Shuo met with Zhang Han. As for the other Qin general, Wang Li, perhaps sensing Ouyang Shuo's dissatisfaction with him, he didn't approach him. Instead, he left with south of Rosy Clouds. He had no idea what kind of conditions south of Rosy Clouds offered to poach Wang Li. Ouyang Shuo didn't mind if he left. After spending some time together, Zhang Han had fully acknowledged Ouyang Shua. Without waiting for Ouyang Shua to speak, he immediately kowtowed and said, Zhang Han pays respect to the Marquis. Good. General Zhang, please rise. Shanghai City had gained another general, so Ouyang Shua was naturally happy. No lord would complain about having too many generals, let alone a general like Zhang Han. In the Battle of Colossal Deer, Ouyang Shua had not only obtained a large number of contribution points, but he had also obtained the light armor crafting manual and the ancient farming tool crafting manual. Most importantly, he had subdued Xiao He, Han Xian, Zhang Han, and Xiao Hoang. It had to be said that Ouyang Shua was the biggest winner. And this wasn't even counting the final reward for the war champion. Ouyang Shua took a look at Zhang Han's stats. Name, Zhang Han, Emperor, title, King Yong, Dynasty, Qin Dynasty identity, General of Shanghai City, occupation, Special General loyalty, 75 Commander, 90 Martial Strength, 72 Intelligence, 65 Politics, 45 Specialty, Valiant General, increases troop morale by 30, movement speed by 20, combat prowess by 15. Cultivation technique, none, equipment, Qin Jian, evaluation. Zhang Han is the valiant general of the Qin dynasty, undefeatable. Zhang Han killed Zhou Zhang, defeated Qin Shi, subdued Wei Jiao, and killed Tian Ao. Wherever he went, he was as easy as a fox hunting a rabbit. Later on, he encountered Xiang Liang and fought a bitter battle before defeating him. Zhang Han was the fourth emperor general of Shanghai City after Shi Wansui, Ilai, and Fan Lihua. In the afternoon, the final reward was finally delivered to Ouyang Shua. Ouyang Shua took a look and saw that it was a martial arts manual. Upon closer inspection, he discovered that it was actually his sovereign-level sword technique. He couldn't help but be overjoyed. He had no more regrets in this battle. Name, Killing Sword Technique, Emperor-level technique. Moves, 7 kills of the killing sword. First kill living, second kill pawns, third kill warriors, fourth kill generals, fifth kill oneself, sixth kill common beings, seventh kill ghosts and gods. Ultimate move, 100-mile massacre. Once the killing sword is unleashed, there will be no one within 100 miles. Evaluation. A peerless sword technique refined by the Qin army on the battlefield with the Qin sword, as expected of the Qin military swordsmanship. Even though he had yet to cultivate it, just by looking at the introduction, he could already feel a surge of killing intent assaulting him. Ouyang Shua put away the sword art, but he did not immediately practice it. He had to find a secluded place to practice this sword technique alone. The battle map was obviously not a suitable place. Let's go. Ouyang Shua's gains from this battle were rather abundant, so it naturally wasn't without a price. The army of Shanghai City had also suffered heavy losses in this battle. Half of the 3,000 Featherwood Guards had died in battle, but fortunately, they had been promoted to Divine Martial Guards. More than 800 of the 2,500 Mountain Barbarian Heavy Infantry had died in battle, and the losses were also heavy. More than 2,400 of the Imperial Guard Division had died in battle. Those who died in battle were all the most elite soldiers of Shanghai City. When Ouyang Shua returned to the main plane, it was already the 27th of July. The moment he walked out of the teleportation array, a system announcement rang in his ears. System announcement. The Battle of Giant Deer has officially ended. The main historical figures of the Qin dynasty have automatically joined the game. Please explore on your own. The history of the Qin dynasty was relatively short. Apart from the famous officials and generals of the Qin Shi Huang, most of them either lasted until the Western Han dynasty or had already been subdued by the lords on the battle map. The only one that people were concerned about was probably the sage strategist Zhang Liang. Therefore, compared to the spring and autumn warring states period, the lords had much lower expectations for the Qin dynasty. Not only the Qin dynasty, but there were also very few other dynasties that could compare to the spring and autumn warring states period. Soon after, another system announcement appeared, and it caused a huge uproar. System announcement. The first emperor of the Qin dynasty has officially entered Xianyang City. The imperial court of Xianyang City has been replaced by the Qin dynasty. Li Si, Wei Liao, Wang Jian, Wang Bin, Meng Tian, Meng Yi, and other famous officials and generals have automatically joined the Qin dynasty. The moment the announcement came out, the world was in an uproar. The first emperor of Qin had entered Xianyang City. This was another new setting. Not only did the players speculate whether the other royal cities would also change dynasties in the future. Apart from the first emperor of Qin, the famous officials and generals who had followed the first emperor of Qin to conquer the world had also automatically joined the Qin dynasty. This way, the first emperor of Qin was no longer alone. Just what kind of effect this change would have on the wilderness was unknown. Only Ouyang Shuo was the calmest. In his previous life, the first emperor of Qin had also entered Xianyang City. This was not surprising. The last time Du Ruhui met the emperor of Dali, she could not see his face clearly. This was because the emperor of Dali had not been confirmed yet. As the war progressed, each of the 9 royal cities would have a real emperor. Of course, having an emperor in the royal cities did not mean that they would immediately attack the wilderness. Take Xianyang City as an example. If the first emperor of Qin wanted to expand his territory, which lord of Xianyang City could resist him? None. Historically, the emperors entering the royal cities only increased the possibilities of the game. This was true for both the lords and adventure-type players. In addition, it increased the difficulty for the lords to attack the royal cities. In the future, if Ouyang Shuo wanted to occupy the Supreme Court, he would not be able to avoid the Supreme Court. It would not be easy to take down the royal cities. In the 5 years of his previous life, no royal cities had fallen. The appearance of the first emperor of Qin had already surprised the players. Unexpectedly, Gaia was still not satisfied. Immediately after, he threw down another heavy bomb, causing the feudal lords to feel dizzy. System announcement. The hegemon king of Western Chu, Xiangyu, has officially entered the wilderness and established the Chu kingdom, with Peng City as its capital. Xiangyin, Xiangliang, Xiangbo, Xiangzhuang, Yuji, and other relatives have automatically joined the Chu kingdom. Xiangyin was Xiangyu's grandfather. He had 3 sons. The eldest son, Xiangchu, Xiangyu's father, died young. The second son, Xiangliang, was killed by Zhang Han in the Battle of Dingtao. The third son, Xiangbo, surrendered to Liu Bang and was given the surname Liu and the title of Marquis of Xiyang. Xiangzhuang, Xiangyu's cousin, Yuji, Xiangyu's wife, did not appear in the Battle of Giant Deer. This time, she appeared together in the wilderness. The entire Xiangshi family was resurrected. With Xiangyu as the core and Peng City as the capital, they established the Chu kingdom. Although it was a country, it was actually a city. Following the system announcement, at the northernmost part of the Jianya district, near the Wan'an province, a white light suddenly flashed and a capital city appeared. It was Peng City. Peng City was the original capital of the Yellow Emperor. It had a superior geographical location. To the north was the Ludong province. To the east was the Jianya district. To the south was the Wan'an province. To the west was the Zhongyuan province. With the establishment of the Chu kingdom, the southeast region of the China region became more and more lively. The biggest headache was probably the red blood city of the Battle Wolves. The distance between the two cities was not far. Different from the first emperor of Qin entering Xianyang City, Gaia described Xiangyu as entering the wilderness. In other words, Xiangyu and his Chu kingdom would participate in the struggle for supremacy in the wilderness. In fact, the Xiangshi family's entry had already foreshadowed the second expansion pack. In the future, the wilderness would become more and more lively. With the 2 system announcements, the world would once again change greatly. Under the great changes, whoever could stand at the head of the tide would be the strongest. For Ouyang Shuo, this was also a huge test. After returning to Shanghai City, Ouyang Shuo gathered all the civil and military officials and had a simple meeting. The main thing was to introduce the 4 new members to everyone present. Ouyang Shuo announced a series of personnel appointments and removals. First, the establishment of the 3rd Corps of Shanghai City, the Leopard Legion. The first independent regiment led by Wei Zhang was renamed the 1st Regiment of the Leopard Legion. Han Xin was given the title of Great General and assumed the position of commander of the Leopard Legion. Ouyang Shua gave Han Xin the title of Great General instead of Great General. This meant that Han Xin was still the person with the highest rank in the military of Shanghai City. His position was unshakable. After being given the title, Han Xin would follow Bai Qi to Liuzhou County to command the Battle of Zhaoqing. Bai Qi would be the commander-in-chief, and Han Xin the vice-commander-in-chief. Zhang Han would temporarily assume the position of vice-commander-in-chief of the Leopard Legion and follow the army. In the future, when Zhaoqing County was conquered, Zhang Han would be responsible for establishing the Leopard Legion's 2nd Regiment. Xiao He and Xiahou Ying would temporarily stay in the Southern Border Protectorate. Xiao He was a great talent and a famous minister. Unfortunately, there was no suitable position in the Southern Border Protectorate. Ouyang Shua could only temporarily put Xiao He in the position of a minister and assist him in handling government affairs. As for Xiahou Ying, Ouyang Shua didn't want to let him join the army. The army didn't lack a general like Xiahou Ying. He had a more suitable stage. As mentioned before, Xiahou Ying had held the position of Grand Pagoda for a long time and had rich experience in managing carriages and horses. It would be a waste for such a talent to be placed in the army. Ouyang Shua wondered if he should establish a department similar to the Imperial Servant Temple under the framework of the Southern Border Protectorate to manage the horses in the territory. For the time being, the territory only had the Storm Valley Horse Farm and the Blessed Lake Horse Farm. But as the territory expanded, there would be more and more horse farms. War horses were a strategic resource for the army. It wasn't just war horses. In the later stages of the game, other mounts would also be added to the ranks of cavalry. Ouyang Shua knew in his previous life that there were special mounts such as rhinoceroses, wolves, and war elephants. Thus, it was necessary to establish a specialized department. Previously, the Lianzhou Marquis Manor had a carriage department. With the removal of the supplies department, the carriage department was also removed. It didn't seem appropriate to continue using the name of the carriage department. As for the specifics, they would have to discuss it in detail. After a simple meeting, Bai Qi, Han Xin, and Zhang Han immediately set off for Liuzhou. Eli led the Mountain Barbarian Heavy Infantry Brigade back to Mulan Fortress. The battle had just ended, but the main map was once again engulfed in smoke. To be continued. Chapter 431. That night, the Southern Protectorate Office. BNK came to the residence to check Ouyang Shua's pulse. How is it? It was Song Jia. Song Jia went back to the Protectorate Office as soon as she heard that Ouyang Shua was injured. BNK frowned. The poison Marquis suffered from is called Jackdaw's poison. It's a rare poison. Is there an antidote? It's difficult. How can this be? Even you can't do anything? Song Jia was worried. Jackdaw's poison is strange and tough. It can be suppressed, but it's hard to get rid of. BNK knew the poison well. Is Jackdaw's poison a type of cold poison? Yes. Is the rhino horn detoxification pill useless? Jackdaw's poison is even more vicious than Master Lin's poison. BNK shook his head and said, if I'm right, Marquis must have taken the inner core of an ironback beast, right? That's right. Ouyang Shua's expression was calm. If it weren't for the inner core, he would have been poisoned. If that's the case, would the inner core of an ironback beast be effective? BNK thought for a moment and said, I don't think regular wild beasts will work. It has to be the inner core of a beast king. Only by combining it with a special grade rhinoceros horn detoxification pill can the Jackdaw's poison be completely eradicated. That's great. Song Jia was delighted. BNK shook his head. As far as I know, ironbacks are rare and beast kings are even rarer. It's not easy to find a beast king and kill it. I don't believe that we can't find a beast king on the entire Jingzhou. Song Jia, on the other hand, was stubborn. She was determined to go to the Cliff State herself to find the Beast King. Ouyang Shua saw through her plan right away. He smiled. You don't have to go. I'll send a letter to Tian Wenjing and Sun Bin and ask them to take care of it. No. Song Jia shook her head. The army won't be able to find the Beast King. I'll take my disciples with me, so they can gain some experience. Ouyang Shua didn't object. Tianchi and the others were still training in the Cliff State. He wondered if they were fine. So it was decided. After BNK left, Song Jia looked at Ouyang Shua with dissatisfaction and coquettishly said, "Idiot, you're already so old, yet you still don't know how to take care of yourself." Ouyang Shua only smiled. Asshole. Song Jia was both angry and amused. Right, Big Brother wrote me a letter. Quebec Song Jia frowned and said, there seems to be some disagreement within the family regarding Shanghai City's attack on Zhaoqing County. Second uncle is the most against it. Ouyang Shua smiled playfully and said, does your second uncle think that Zhaoqing County is his? Song is. The people of the clan were a little too arrogant. How could Tianchuan County possibly swallow up Zhaoqing County? Needless to say, Wu was the Southern Protector General. Not to mention Zhaoqing County, even the entire Lingnan province was within Shanghai City sights. At a time like this, how could he have any ambitions? Without Shanghai City's backing, Tianchuan County wouldn't even be able to gain a foothold in Lingnan province. How could they have enjoyed the limitless glory they had today? As a junior, it was not appropriate for her to speak ill of her elders behind their backs. It's fine. Ouyang Shua patted Song Jia's shoulder and said with a smile, I will take care of it. When he decided to attack Zhaoqing County, Ouyang Shua had already expected this. No matter what, the Song family was also an aristocratic family. How could they lack ambitious people? However, ambition was only ambition. In the face of absolute power, all tricks were useless. Considering Song Jia's feelings, Ouyang Shua would naturally handle it appropriately. Yes. Song Jia nodded and snuggled into Ouyang Shua's embrace. Song Jia already had a deep understanding of this man. She knew that her lover had gone through a series of trials and tribulations and was no longer the ignorant person he used to be. His methods, bearing, and wisdom were hard to fathom for ordinary people. Song Jia rejoiced that she had bravely confessed to him that day. Obtaining such a person's heart was enough in this life. By the way, find some time to bring your parents to Shanghai City for a chat. Why? Can't I pay a visit to my future father-in-law? Who knows what you're planning? Song Jia did not believe that Wu Yi simply wanted to meet her parents. Otherwise, he would have met them long ago. Why would he wait until now? You're smart. Ouyang Shua did not deny it. Since the Song family was divided, he naturally had to support his future father-in-law's side and completely control the family. This matter had to be discussed in detail. If Ouyang Shua rushed to Tianchuan County, he would definitely be surrounded by the people of the Song family. He might not have the chance to talk to his future father-in-law in detail. With Song Jia's intelligence, she vaguely guessed Ouyang Shua's intentions. Wait for me to come back from Cliff Province. Okay. Ouyang Shua could not cultivate if the jackdaw poison in his body was not cured. Even the inner cannon of the Yellow the Arch mainly suppressed the poison and could not increase his true origin. As for the slaying sword cannon that he had just obtained, he could only cultivate it later. The next day, Ouyang Shua sent Song Jia off. Before leaving, Ouyang Shua told Song Jia to go to Cliff Province and bring Tianchi and the others back to his territory. He had arrangements. Song Jia gave Ouyang Shua a strange look and did not say anything. She just nodded. Speaking of which, Ouyang Shua had been supporting the Eastern Fence Sword sect all the way. Next, it was time for them to play a role. After sending Song Jia off, Ouyang Shua summoned Black Snake. Marquis. Black Snake was dressed in black, with a black cloak and even a hood. Seeing Ouyang Shua, Black Snake took off his hood. Since the establishment of the Black Snake Guard, the original Black Mamba had completely disappeared and was replaced by a mysterious black snake. Even the people of Shanghai City rarely noticed the existence of Black Snake. Of course, Ouyang Shua was an exception. Ouyang Shua nodded and said 2 tasks. First, send people to find the divine, craftsman Oyezi. Second, increase the infiltration of the Rosy Cloud Alliance, especially Rosy Cloud County. Understood. Black Snake's words were concise and comprehensive. Neither task was easy, but Black Snake was still full of confidence. After a few months of expansion, the Black Snake Guard's influence in the China region was no small matter. With the 9 intelligence stations as nodes and Ouyang Shua's enormous financial support, the Black Snake Guard had already woven an enormous intelligence network in the China region. Of course, compared to the Imperial Wind of Handan City, the Black Snake Guard was still somewhat lacking. The establishment of Imperial Wind did not only use the resources of an emperor family. There was also the mysterious resources that Peerless had secretly controlled. This mysterious beauty was not simply Di Chen's advisor. Didn't they see that even the Di family didn't dare to criticize Peerless elegance? These invisible resources were incomparable to the Black Snake Guards. The strength of Imperial Wind lay in its deep network of players. The Black Snake Guard's main target was naturally the NPCs. In this aspect, Shanghai City had a unique advantage. The stacking of the various territorial characteristics and the strong territorial popularity were not just for show. At the same time, the strength of the Black Snake Guard also made Ouyang Shua wary. Although Ouyang Shua still had the confidence to control the Black Snake Guard, he could not guarantee that as the Black Snake Guard grew stronger, they would not bypass him and do other shady things. In the process of establishing the Black Snake Guard, Ouyang Shua would definitely not let go and let the Black Snake Guard handle alone. Some of the personnel arrangements had left traces of Ouyang Shua. To this, the Black Snake also tacitly agreed. The Black Snake knew that if the Marquis did not make such arrangements, it would instead be abnormal. It could only mean that the Marquis did not trust the Black Snake Guard. In the past, intelligence agencies like this were full of shady dealings. The most effective way was to complete Ouyang Shua's original plan. The 3 intelligence agencies would restrict each other. The problem was that the most crucial link, the security department, had yet to make a move. It seemed that the establishment of the security department was really urgent. After the Black Snake left, Wei Yong walked in. Marquis, sit. Is there anything in the internal affairs department? No. Oh. Wei Yang's expression was a little strange. The day before yesterday, Mencius from the Confucian School came to Shanghai City to study. Mencius? Ouyang Shua's expression jerked. According to the time that had passed, it ought to be the time when the 100 schools contend against each other erupted. This is interesting. Not bad. I think he's prepared to debate with you. Are you confident? Full of confidence. All right. Ouyang Shua laughed heartily and said, since it's like this, then let's make it a little bigger. This Marquis will send out invitations, inviting all the disciples of the 100 schools to participate in this grand meeting. Ouyang Shua could faintly sense that the time for a great debate was ripe. Among the 100 schools of thought, Confucianism, legalism, Moism, and Taoism were the strongest. Among them, the Confucian school attracted the most hatred. The struggle between Confucianism and legalism, the struggle between Confucianism and Moism, and the struggle between Confucianism and Taoism ran through from beginning to end. In the struggle between Confucianism and legalism, the most fundamental issue was the rule of virtue or the rule of law. The conflict between Confucianism and Moism was a question of benevolence or universal love. The battle between Confucianism and Taoism was a question of whether one should do something or not. In the Qin dynasty, legalism was the orthodoxy. At the beginning of the Han dynasty, the Taoist doctrine of Huang Lao emphasized the rule of non-interference and recuperation. It was only during the reign of Emperor Wu of Han that the Confucian school became the orthodox school. Of course, the phrase dismissing the 100 schools of thought and reigning supreme over Confucianism was a combination of the various schools of thought. On the surface, Confucianism was the orthodoxy, but in reality, it was still the legalism doctrine. When it was time to kill, they would not be lenient. Thus, the struggle between Confucianism and legalism was the most important. As one of the representatives of Confucianism, Mencius naturally did not come to Shanghai City to take a stroll. Everyone knew that one of the representatives of legalism, Wei Yang, was becoming an official in Shanghai City. In the end, Confucianism and legalism would have to fight. As a lord, Ouyang Shuo would not participate in the struggle between the 100 schools of thought. He pursued the principle of tolerance and tolerance. Thus, Ouyang Shuo used this as an opportunity to hold a great debate. To be continued, you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.